All good. All good. How are you? I'm touched because it's recording. It's on. Live. No, wait. I can still. So, here. When we start yeah. I see.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. I apologize, I should have said excellencies first. Good morning. I think we want to start. So, yes. Come on in, we're starting. Good. Ladies and gentlemen, we will start. I want to extend a very warm welcome to you. This morning in Geneva, it's a beautiful morning in here because we are going to talk about science policy. The team at UNEP and the Geneva Environment Network has put together an exciting program for us. It's very interactive, so you will have lots of opportunity to network and learn and share your knowledge. But now we must start. So my name is Jane Munker. I am an environmental scientist. I've been working on the impacts of chemicals on ecosystems and on health for the last 25 years. And I'm actually also involved in the plastics treaty negotiation process. I'm a member of the Science Coalition for an effective plastics treaty, but my day job is that I'm the managing director and chief scientific officer of a science policy interface called the Food Packaging Forum. And today it's my pleasure and honor to be your moderator. I am actually stepping in for Yvonne. Yvonne Higuero, who's Secretary General of CITES. She's on her way. So when she arrives, I will hand over to her because opening this important day is actually her honor. But without any further ado, I would like to welcome to the stage His Excellency Ambassador Felix Wertli of Switzerland to share with us his opening remarks. Welcome, Felix, and an applause, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Excellencies, colleagues, delegates. Very happy to be here. Great to see you all. I would also like to thank the Geneva Environment Network for organizing this Science Policy Day here at the Environment House in Geneva. Colleagues, we're at the end of a long year now. We had a lot of meetings. Think about the CBD meeting in Rome. We had the climate COP. We had the BRS COPs. We had the plastic negotiations. And just last week, we had UNEA. And what we saw in all those processes, how important science is. We all know if you want to effectively protect environment and human health, we need science. And if you want to have effective environmental policies, we need science policies interfaces. And I know sometimes this year was not the easiest one for multilateralism and also multilateral negotiations in the field of environment. But it also is good to remember the important steps we are moving forward. We have a lot of progress. And one of those is that we have established the ISP, so the National Science Policy Panel on Chemistry, Waste and Pollution. This was decided in 2022, so 3 years ago at UNEA 5.2. And we have managed in this very short time not only to establish the panel, but also we know that the first plenary session will be held in February here in Geneva. And now with this establishment of this panel, we have now the 3 panels. We have IPCC for the climate change, we have IPBES for biodiversity, and we have the ISP CWP for the pollution cluster. And I'm very much convinced that the new panel will also collaborate with the other 2 panels and also be helpful for the whole chemicals and waste cluster to provide important information there. And Switzerland, we are very much committed to this kind of to the ISPs because we believe it's a key tool to have effective and evidence-based policy making. And that's why we're excited to be here together with all of you. We wanted to bring together stakeholders, scientists, representatives from governments, to talk to each other how we can make best use of those science policy interfaces, how to improve them, how to strengthen collaboration. And we look very much forward to an interesting program today and hope also that we are able to connect in this time because we also know that behind the panels, behind the science, behind the government remarks, always human beings. And we are able to connect with each other, then also can develop ideas and strengthen those panels because we are strengthened by connecting ourselves. So I'm looking forward to discussion, to sharing ideas on cooperation throughout the entire day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Felix. And I have to say, I'm very impressed how these acronyms roll off your tongue. I'm still practicing the ISP CWP, but by the end of today, maybe that's a bit smoother. What's really smooth is the IPCC. That's been around for a long time. And so it's my great pleasure to welcome the Secretary of IPCC, Mr. Abdallah Moqsit, to the stage to share his opening remarks. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Ambassador Felix Wertli, Mrs. Yvonne Higuro, Moderator and Secretary General for Cities, Mr. Lutando Ziva, Executive Secretary, IPBES, Mrs. Jacqueline Alvarez, Head of Chemical and Health Branch, UNEP. Dear colleagues and gentlemen, on behalf of IPCC, I would like to thank the government of Switzerland, the Geneva Environment Network and their partners for bringing us together for this Science Policy Day. It is a real privilege to open this discussion. I am especially pleased that this event looks at the critical role of science policy interfaces. They provide scientific and actionable knowledge to support sound and effective action and decision-making addressing the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Our response must be interlinked and complementary if they are to be effective. The IPCC is the first of science policy panels, and for nearly 4 decades, It has shown how science can truly bridge knowledge and action. The key word is credibility. It comes from combining two qualities: strong scientific independence and clear intergovernmental ownership. This balance has been central to the IPCC's success in enabling policymakers worldwide to take informed, evidence-based decisions on climate action. Being policy relevant, policy neutral, and non-prescriptive is not a procedural detail, but our critical part of our DNA. But be aware that IPCC doesn't have more to test his DNA, so just DNA, it is our DNA. And a solid foundation for building trust. Clear roles, transparent processes, diverse and independent author teams, and robust review procedures are what gives IPCC scientific funding, authority, and legitimacy, especially when they inform critical policy choices. Inclusivity is equally critical. When more voices are heard, science becomes more relevant. Under the leadership of our chair, Professor Sergei Zimsky, who will speak later today, the IPCC has made real progress on inclusivity. We have stronger links with partners, closer engagement with IPCC consistency, and with the other two panels on biodiversity and on chemical and waste and pollution. Genuine and systematic collaboration between the three panels can strengthen coherence, learning, and impact across all segments of triple planetary crisis. I'm sure that collaboration is a good word that is expected from this panel. So this is something I want to highlight it twice. But you should pay for this. As the longest standing assessment panel within the United Nations, we have developed a model that speaks of credibility, policy relevance, and inclusivity. This model has been adopted by other panels such as IPBES, and together with IPBES, we have contributed to shaping the architecture of the newly established panel on chemicals and pollution, which completes the landscape of environmental scientific assessment panels. Collaboration among the three panels is essential for addressing the interdisciplinary nature of our work. One of the three core themes of the vision set by the chair of the IPCC during this 7th cycle. So, before also thanking you, I think all our panels need to focus more on science. But sometimes these panels, during special financial situation, are there to look for fundraising. Our role is to do science, not to do fundraising. And this is why we are asking, and we are taking the opportunity for this meeting to look for the possibility to mobilize resources to ensure that these authors working on a voluntary basis that can work without paying and using their time to mobilize resources. So this is an appeal, because if you want to all this panel to continue in sustainable way, I think the appeal is to all of you to contribute to this fundraising. So thank you once again. And also I want really special thanks to Switzerland, because you are hosting us. And it is like, a sort of when someone is hosting us, they should take care of us all the time. I'm sorry to say this, but yes, thank you again. So, but we are really grateful to your, to your support. And I think not only it's support financial, but also the participation of all your team, yourself, Your Excellency, our focal points, Sebastian, and all the team, Sonia, and so on. I think you are hosting and also contributing. I want to thank you for this. So your sustained engagement and support are fundamental to IPCC work, enabling it to continue providing the evidence base that policymakers rely to address climate change. We encourage your continued scientific and funding support to IPCC work. And last but not least, I wish to thank Geneva Environment Network, and all the participants who joined us today, both in person and online. I will conclude by to say that IPCC has 37 experience in this panel. That this allows us to be even a sort of consultant. I am looking to my colleague, Executive Secretary of IPBES. If he needs some support, we can support you, but you should pay us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abdullah. Great. And the good news is Yvonne is here, but Yvonne, I will call on the last gentleman first. This time, today we do it the other way around, not ladies first. We do gentlemen first. So our next speaker with a brief introduction is Luthando Jiba, who's the Executive Secretary of IPBES. Welcome, Luthando.
Thank you very much. Really great to be here this morning, and excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Would like to really thank first the government of Switzerland and the Geneva Network for organizing this gathering today, which places science at the core of decision making. I think one of our assessments, the most recent assessment on the nexus, which considers the interlinkages between biodiversity, water, food, health, and climate, basically, one of its conclusions was that our challenges are interlinked, yet our responses are often siloed, segmented, sectoral, and fragmented. So I think this meeting today is an expression of this call to basically think in an integrated way, to think in a way that basically appreciates the fact that we are dealing with an interconnected world and we're dealing with these interconnected challenges. And so how we respond to that needs to be integrated. And I think if we sort of think about today as basically the beginning of this framing, not only in our conversations, but in decision-making, in policy-making, but more importantly, in action. We need to make sure that we think in a way that is different from the way we have often operated before. The way IPBES operates, and our bigger sister organization has already sort of laid the ground in this, is that our work ensures that we undertake assessments, scientific assessments that are credible, relevant, and ensure legitimacy through peer review and transparency. But I think the key thing here is that in ensuring scientific independency underpins the legitimacy of policymaking, it's important to basically appreciate that this is not just about science, synthesis of the science work, but it's also about the co-production of this with policymakers, so that at the end of the day, they own and can implement the decisions that are outcomes of these integrated processes. We know that the credibility of science is being questioned on a very regular basis. And I think I want to say that IPBES remains committed to ensuring that robust, independent science underpins policy and decision making. And we want to do that in a way that is collaborative, appreciating that, if we work only within the biodiversity sector, it doesn't matter how hard we work. We will only achieve very small impact. But if we work together collaboratively across sectors, we have a very good and established collaboration with the IPCC. So far, we have not had to pay anything for that. And we hope that we will have a good collaboration as well with the new kid on the block, the SPCWP, and we've shared so much already about how we work. And I think this is the approach that we hope underpins our approach, to policy, to decision making, but more importantly, to action. But I think we need to also take this conversation beyond decision makers and policy makers to all of us, to all of the actors, to civil society, to youth, to women, to basically all actors, to business and the private sector, so that we can ensure that basically it's not just something that stays in the big houses where decisions are made, but all of us are involved in ensuring this integration, in ensuring that thinking or our thinking is integrated in a way that helps us to solve these complex problems that we face today. Thank you very much. With that, I want to welcome you and wish us all an engaging and stimulating day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luthander. Wonderful. And now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Yvonne, who is the, yes, will you introduce yourself? Okay, who's actually the moderator of this opening session. So welcome, Yvonne, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I am Yvonne Higuero. I am the CITES Secretary General, and I still feel like we just finished our COP 2 weeks ago, and I still feel like I'm running from event to event, so sorry for being a little bit late. After that, Lutando, you were with me at the United Nations Environment Assembly, also running from event to event, so my apologies for being a little bit late. I wasn't remembering the traffic in Geneva, so sorry for that. So I'm here to welcome you also, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, to the International Environment House for this interesting gathering on strengthening the science policy interface to address the triple planetary crisis, which has been kindly organized by the Geneva Environment Network. And we have been talking about this for the past week, about the triple planetary crisis, and we are meeting here today as we confront these issues of biodiversity loss, pollution, and climate change. And something that we also had very much in mind during our own conference of the parties and at the United Nations Environment Assembly was the issue of multilateralism. And we really have to address all of these problems by continuing to have multilateralism and coordinated action as cornerstones for addressing these global challenges. And I think also that we talked a lot about coordination, and it's really nice to see here IPCC, IPBES, and then now the new sister on the block dealing with pollution and waste and chemicals. So again, we need this better coordination amongst all of us to be able to really address these three challenges that we are confronting right now. And then the science policy interface really are the bridges between rigorous knowledge and effective policy. They ensure that evidence guides ambition and ambition translates into impact. Because now we know we are confronting also crisis, financial crisis, geopolitical issues, and we have to now band together and be able to create that evidence for the decision making and be impactful by working together. Now, over the past decades to work on this, the international community has built a remarkable architecture. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, established in 1988, with the secretariat here in Geneva, a cornerstone of global climate science. Then the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, or IPBES, established in 2012, located in Bonn, strengthening the science policy interface for biodiversity ecosystem services, which we at CITES use very much. We had an assessment on sustainable use of wildlife that has been very useful for decision-making at CITES as well. And now completing what we call the trifecta, we have the Intergovernmental Science Policy Panel on Chemicals, Waste and Pollution, or ISPCWP, established this year, marking a new milestone in tackling the third planetary crisis. We are very delighted to have all these representatives here on the panels today. Together, these panels and other scientific bodies really underpin the implementation of multilateral environmental agreements, as I said, including CITES and global frameworks, such as the Paris Agreement, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the Global Framework on Chemicals for a Planet Free of Harm from Chemicals and Waste. And in this evolving context, strengthening the science policy interface is essential. Just as an example of CITES, how important the science policy interface, it's not really an abstract concept, but it is really the very foundation of the convention. All the decision making, when there's a decision to be taken about what species, what new plant or animal species should be added to the appendices, the evidence based on science is absolutely important. The decisions on the international wildlife trade are grounded in scientific assessments or non-detriment findings that include consideration of species population status and trends, distribution, threats, trade trends, and patterns of harvest and mortality, and management measures. Some of this can be answered with some of the assessments that have been done by the IPBES, for example. So our collaboration with IPBES, CBD, CMS, and other multilateral environmental agreements offer real opportunities to strengthen coordination across the climate, biodiversity, and trade agendas. Now, this event is especially timely. It follows the launch of the 7th edition of the Global Environmental Outlook, or GEO7, at the UNEA 7 last week, and it precedes the inaugural plenary of the ISP CWP here in Geneva, which will be held in February next year. Throughout today's program, lightning talks, fireside chats, panel discussions, and the interactive fair, you will engage with leading experts, policymakers, and stakeholders. Together, we can transform knowledge into action and action into hope. As we are gathering at the end of a challenging year, allow me also to highlight some major achievements in 2025. The biodiversity finance commitments agreed at the resume session, the receipt of the 60th ratification of the Agreement on Marine Biological Diversity of Areas Beyond National Jurisdiction, or the BBNJ agreement in September that set in motion its entry into force in January 2026, and the entry into force of the WTO Fisheries Agreement last September. All very good news that we have been able to have this year. Many of us, as I said, are gathering here back from the 7th session of the UNEA, and this shows all the decisions that were taken there, the resolutions moving us forward on our environment-related agendas. I take this opportunity as Secretary General of CITES just to say a little bit about how we concluded the COP on the 5th of December with 2 arduous but remarkable weeks in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, and shaping its future, the future of the convention, and reaffirming its role in ensuring that international trade in wildlife does not threaten their survival in the wild, as CITES has done for over 50 years. It's our birthday this year of entry into force. The decisions adopted in Samarkand advance the CITES strategic vision, reinforce the convention's contribution to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, particularly its goals and targets on sustainable use and reducing threats to species. At COP20, I called to carry forward the spirit of Samarkand, the spirit of cooperation, dialogue, and shared responsibility. As we gather here in Geneva, let us also celebrate the spirit of Geneva, its centuries-long role as a hub for peace, diplomacy, and multilateralism. I am very grateful to our host government, Switzerland, whom we sincerely thank for your continued support and valuable support to the environment community and UNEP family, and providing financial support to the Geneva Environment Network and other initiatives. Thank you so much for all your support, also to us as MEAs residing hosted here in Geneva. So finally, to conclude our opening segment, it is my pleasure to turn to Ms. Jacqueline Alvarez, head of the Chemicals and Health Branch of UNEP, speaking on behalf of the Secretariat of the newest of our panels. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Oh, I think I'm short. Okay, no, super. Where do I start? Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's a real pleasure to be with you on behalf of UNEP today, but I'd like maybe to share with you some thoughts, and particularly the power of 3. So we have the 3 planetary crises, we have the 3 global frameworks responding to the planetary crisis. We have now the 3 panels. But today I'm not going to talk about those things. I'm going to talk about the power of the past, the present, and the future. In the past, you have heard many things that we have been doing over the years as UNEP, but also all of you in your different roles, in your different capacities. And I can say from reports to really engaging with different stakeholders, the diversity of views that are consolidated in what we are calling our legacies. That's, we gave birth as UNEP, but also in the international community to the different panels and to the different things. Not very long ago, and I'm going to turn right now into the present because it's really part of our present, the many different reports or the different findings on heavy metals. And again, heavy metals, yes, we have not yet solved them. Endocrine disrupting chemicals, we have not solved them. Antimicrobial resistance, a very, very big challenging topic. We have 2 resolutions from UNEA, making us continue to work towards that. UNEA, the last 2 weeks, I can define it maybe as the hardest UNEA for myself, meaning that it was completely something unpredictable in many of the different circumstances, but multilateralism won because we have resolutions. We have, in a way, a continuation of the work we are doing. But why is the present important? Because we are shaping the future. And that we cannot forget. The future is in our hands because of what we do today. And this is my pledge to all of you for the future. Ask the right questions to the science policy bodies. We have IPCC, we have IPBES, we have the new science policy panel on chemicals, waste and pollution for chemicals. And in reality, it's up to us to be relevant. It's up to us not to be policy prescriptive. It's up to us to be authoritative in the questions we ask those panels to help us solve. Having said that, all of them are independent. All of them have the capacity to really shape and modulate what they are willing to undertake. But if we don't ask the questions that we should be asking, that includes social dimensions, that includes financial dimensions, as we have been hearing, we will never make a change. So that's my pledge. We heard very strongly foundation. Yes, we know the science, but what we are still lacking is the action that needs to follow. In many cases, very slow. Do we have to fast track? I don't know the answer to that. But what I know is that if we don't act very quickly, we will not make it. One example, by 2050, if we don't tackle the antimicrobial resistance problem that we have today, we will go back to the Fleming era. Remember Fleming, that guy that realized that it was very important to have the mold and being an antiseptic, antibiotic, and killing all of those bugs that were affecting us? Well, if we don't act today, 2050, let's see who of us can survive to that. So what I'm trying to say very strongly, we have the power of 3 today because we are in the present and we can shape the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for those words. And I think it's important to have those warnings. I still want to feel optimistic that we are going to be able to, now we have this power of 3. I think something else that made us very optimistic was the youth involvement and the youth engagement that now we're having more and more in all of our MEAs, and they were very much present there at the United Nations Environment Assembly. We need to hear their voices as well. So I feel very encouraged, but I think we do have to take this seriously, and we have to invest and ensure that we have really decisions based on science and listen to our scientists and our academia in this. So it is my pleasure now to introduce the next segment of the day, the first round of lightning talks that will be animated by Jane. And thank you, Jane, for helping me earlier. And I ask you to please enjoy the talks and see you a little later for a few words reflecting on the day later on before we open the reception. Thank you very much. Jane.
And thank you so much, Yvonne, and thanks to all our distinguished speakers. And now, without any further ado, we will kick off our lightning talks. I'm so excited. We have 3 speakers in the session, and the first speaker is Mayali Ran, who is a science policy officer at the Geneva Science Policy Interface. And Mayali will speak about global assessments when science speaks and learns. The floor is yours, Mayali. Welcome.
Okay, is that better? Yes, so thank you very much to the Jen, to Diana, and to her team for inviting me to be here. I work for the Geneva Science Policy Interface, which is a platform here in Geneva that promotes collaboration between multilateral actors and scientists. But before I joined the GSPI, I was selected as a lead author for the transformative change assessment, which was just adopted in December. And the transformative change assessment reviewed more than 7,000 sources and reviewed the literature and other forms of knowledge. And for example, it showed us and guided us towards the existing strategies for achieving transformative change. But what I want to talk about today is that global assessments, such as those of IPBES, are merely a synthesis of knowledge or an exercise of knowledge synthesis. They are also a forum for science policy dialogues. During the discussion of the assessment, especially for the summary for policymakers, countries present their position, they read, they take time to learn about the evidence and present how they see the evidence. So this is a really important, as we've heard already for Blefondo. And this process can be quite difficult, demanding for scientists, mind-boggling. And as you can see for the face of my colleagues from the plenary where we discussed the transformative change, it can be quite difficult. So the co-creation that is required in this global assessment requires different skills and competencies on both sides. For example, for the scientists, scientists really need to understand the policy context around the position of countries, which is quite important. And policymakers on the other side need to be open to the evidence and be open to it, to receive it, especially when they're not in line with their own views. And global assessments are also a big exercise of communication. Scientists have to come out of their comfort zone of writing in a scientific way and to write in an accessible and in a tangible way for the policymaker. And policymakers on the other side, during those negotiations of the text, they also have to express their views on how to make the content of the science in a usable way for uptake and also for relevance for their context. And as you have seen, and many colleagues here have been, this process has been increasingly difficult, especially in the recent negotiation that you may have followed. And interfaces are now really faced with the matter of having to protect the integrity of science, but at the same time, fulfilling their mandate of integrating input from the policy side. And keeping the dialogue from policy and science remains essential, especially in the troubling times that we're living now. And a range of interfaces, science policy interfaces, intermediary science policy collaboration play a vital role in finding innovative ways to maintain this dialogue and also to overcome the various challenges that we will discuss today as well. At the GSPI and with partners, some of them here, we are very happy to provide this space and the opportunity to develop the skills and competencies for efficient interface work. And the more we work in this field, the more we see the importance of building a trust between stakeholders, coming to this space with humility and empathy. And this is really how we can make global assessment not just the voice of science, but also a space for learning and mutual understanding. Thank you.
Leonie will be around today, right? So if you have any questions, please find her in the fair and in the coffee breaks. And next is our speaker from the Global Framework on Chemicals, which is the Officer of Health and Labor, Dorothy Njagilo. Welcome. And I forgot to say, you have 3.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. Dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my talk today is, it is about the missing chair. Why the missing chair? I think we've all been in a room like this. I think there's a setup similar to this just behind us, where decisions about chemicals, pollution, and climate are made every day. But there's obvious one chair that is empty or missing, and that's the chair of the people who face these challenges firsthand. It's the people who work at the forefront of chemical exposure, for instance, where they work in places even before the policies can catch up to protect them. It's also about communities that live in places such as this, families that breathe the air and drink the water that is shaped by decisions that are made upstream. It's also about the workers and people working in places like this, where heat exposure, chemicals exposure, and pollution coexist every day. So what ends up happening is our health systems, which are already overstretched, tend to absorb much of this impact, and they work with something that they were not designed to work with to begin with. So what science helps us to do is to make sense of those experiences and turn it into evidence. And in the rare occasion when that evidence reaches policymakers, they may or may not use that evidence to inform policies. But even in that case, the picture is still not complete. So that's why this empty chair is really important, because it represents the voices of the people who rarely make into the rooms where these decisions that are meant to protect them are made. But that chair doesn't need to be empty. When all voices are invited to the table, we'll make decisions that are more grounded in reality. And when every seat is filled in these rooms, we'll make decisions, as I said, that protect everyone, protects communities, workers, and the planet at large. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dorothy, for being perfectly on time. I feel a bit like a coach at a sports event here with my stopwatch around my neck. Our next speaker is Samuel Amos of the Global Environment, not Outlook, but Organization. Did I get that right? Global Observation. Group on Earth Observation, give me. Yeah, I mean, it is confusing, right, with GeoSeven. Okay, welcome. You have 3.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and for the invitation. So I'm from
The mic is not working.
So my name is Samuel Amos, and I'm coming from the Group on Earth Observation Secretariat in Geneva here. And I'm going to talk about youth engagement in this science policy interface. So the triple planetary crisis, climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution is deeply interconnected. And that's probably why we are all here today. Because while the crises are deeply interconnected, I think our response often remains a bit fragmented. So the real challenge is not only understanding the planet, it's connecting the communities shaping solutions across knowledge system and generation. Today, we love data. Actually, we love data so much that we have more than we can handle. According to a white paper from the World Economic Forum published in 2024, Earth observation satellites are expected to generate more than 2 exabytes of data by 2032. So the challenge is no longer data availability. It is turning large and complex data sets into information that is accessible, understandable, and usable for policy decision support. 2 slides ago, I mentioned the need for interconnected solutions. What if this interconnection also means bringing together technical expertise, indigenous knowledge, political will, and the innovative power of youth? This is where the Group on Earth Observations, GEO, comes in. GEO brings Earth observations data together by connecting science, policy, indigenous knowledge, and innovation. GEO is not just about sharing data. It's about building a common understanding of our planet and the problems that its communities face. Youth bring digital fluency, interdisciplinary thinking, and let's be honest, today a very strong sense of urgency. So in 2023, during the Geo-Ministerial Summit in Cape Town, the Geo community officially welcomed the Youth Declaration on Earth Observations. That was a very clear message sent to the world. Youth are not future stakeholders. They are, or let's say we are, present enablers. This is where the Geo-Youth community of practice comes in. It's not just about networking. It's about encouraging and supporting the participation of youth in the co-creation, in the co-design of Earth observation solutions that can support some of today's pressing issues. One example of this is in 2025, the Geo-Youth Ideathon that happened in Rome, where youth professionals developed in just a few days a prototype to detect fine-scale infestations, responding to a very real problem faced by a campsite owner in the city. The Ideathon provided the engagement with local experts, global scientists from different organizations, and as a result, the ideas and EO solutions developed supported local business owners who were experiencing real challenges as a result of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Through capacity building, co-creation, and partnerships, youth helped turn Earth observation data into policy-relevant stories. Because data alone does not change policy, but dialogue does. And youth are helping to translate planetary signals into conversations that decision makers can act on. But for youth engagement to really strengthen the science policy interface, participation has to be meaningful. That's symbolic, not just for a photo opportunity. So youth need to be in the room when questions are framed, not only invited once the conclusions are already written, because I think better inclusion leads to better decisions. So what do youth need to fully play this role? Access to data, of course, access to tools, access to mentors, and most of you can be good mentors, and most importantly, access to policy spaces. So innovation does not happen in isolation. It happens when trust and opportunity meet. Finally, strengthening the science policy interface means empowering those who can connect data, dialogue, and action. Youth are ready, Earth observation sectors are ready. The question is no longer if we involve youth, but how fast we do it, because the planet is not ready.
Thank you, Samuel. Just stay here, please. Could I ask Dorothy and Yanni also to come up again, please? And a big round of applause for our fabulous speakers here. A very, very clear presentation. They will all be around for questions. Please engage with them. And now I'd love to invite you to step outside for our fabulous science policy marketplace and fair. Please go and network. Please learn about the different activities that are presenting their work here and chat, and then come back for the next round in a few minutes. I'll call you back. Enjoy. Thanks.
Oui, oui, tout à fait. We're family now. Moi, j'ai travaillé pendant 25 ans en Suisse, par la sur une solution par trois crises générales. Et ce qu'on fait, on est en train de naviguer les risques essentiels avec un grand groupe d'experts international. Puis, on est en train de faire 3 projets pilotes, 3
Yes. Hope you're doing well. If you can hear us, we're currently having the track event there. So if you can hear us, just let us know, and then we can test your sound and your video. Thank you, David.
It's a joke. Okay. So, this one. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our second round of lightning talks. You know the rules now. The speakers have 3.5 minutes to present their work to us and their one key message. And I'm very excited to kick off this round with Jette Tamelade, who's the Director of Science, Policy and Implementation Services at the Ramsar Convention of Wetlands. And I shared some story with Jette before. I actually did an internship many years ago at the German Ministry of Environment working on the Ramsar Convention. And I think due to my work there, I prevented one of those wetlands from being destroyed. That's what I like to think. Anyway, let's wait one more second here. Welcome back. Please join us in front. Grab a seat. We are about to start with Jette Tamelade, who will speak about the Ramsar Convention of Wetlands. 3, 2, 1. Good. I'm just checking.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I want to give you a snapshot of the Global Wetland Outlook, which is the flagship publication of the Convention on Wetlands. And this year's edition looked particularly at the value that wetlands bring to society, especially in economic terms. The numbers are quite stark. We summarized the best available data on the wetlands that are there and the services that provide. And bottom line is that wetlands value to society is at least equivalent to almost 8% of global GDP. So it means that within the next 50 years, we take care of the wetlands, they will continue to deliver a value of about $200 trillion US. I lost control of the projector.
Sometimes we all have that feeling of losing control. Just keep going, Jette. Please, we'll get it fixed.
But the situation of wetlands today is, of course, and you'll see it on the slide in a moment, is that wetlands are being lost at a rate of at least 0.5% per year. And that's a continuing trend for more than half a century, meaning that we've lost in the last 50-odd years, 1/5 of the world's wetlands, and 1/4 of the remaining wetlands are degraded. So that, of course, translates into significant economic risk to society.
Okay, well, just keep going. I'll see what I can do. Sorry for that.
Hoping to see the slide as well. There we go. Next one, please.
Okay.
For us to actually attain the global targets that countries have adopted, the global biodiversity framework, for target 3, it means that we have to put an area of wetland under conservation equivalent to half the size of Brazil, or approximately the entirety of the Schengen area. So it's a big requirement. Similarly, for restoring wetlands, if we're looking only at lost wetlands, we have to put under effective restoration more than 130 million hectares of lost wetlands. That number rises to more than 300 million hectares if we also consider the ones that are currently degraded. Next slide, please. Okay. At the same time, to meet those targets, the financing for wetlands is nowhere near commensurate with the value they bring, nor with the ambition that is there in our global frameworks. Only 0.25% of global GDP actually supports biodiversity action, and of that only a slim fraction supports wetlands that, as I said, deliver at the very least of our year of 7.5–8% of global GDP. So there is a need to capture this in a different way than we have done to date. We need to be able to account for this value much better in our policy making as a basis for all policy decisions made. And we need to look at different financing models, more innovative and combining different sources of investment in wetlands. Wonderful, thank you. So what did the Global Wetland Outlook actually do for us? The first instance launched just 2 weeks before our COP. It immediately supported and was referenced in 7 different resolutions adopted by our COP by 173 contracting parties. It also informed and helped shape the strategic plan of the convention that was adopted. And it achieved a really good media uptake, 20 times bigger media imprint than our original Global Wetland Outlook, and of course attention across the world. So at least the message is reaching out. And what that message is of course, we can track the progress that we need to make. We can inform decisions that need to be made, but there are critical gaps in how that information is used, in the systems that need to use this data, and the data itself actually has significant gaps in it. Wetlands are far less known than many other ecosystem types, and if you look at environmental accounting for wetlands, for example, it is far less developed than for forests or for ocean systems. And so this data needs to be strengthened, and the planning and decision systems need to be strengthened. To act on this finding, we've established, together with a group on Earth observation, partners in space agencies, an initiative specifically addressing this. Better data on wetland extent and condition that can be used to support environmental accounting, that can be used to support decision making, and rolling out at the national level, empowering countries with national wetland inventories that they can then use for multiple purposes. And that's all I wanted to say. The report is available online. My last point, and I take my extra minutes from the campaign, is that please help us celebrate World Wetlands Day on the 2nd of February next year. And feel free to spread the report and its findings in the context of that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jekka. And I wanna congratulate you on navigating a very difficult situation. And just a quick comment, you saw we had a problem and we solved it by collaboration. So that's completely the spirit that we have here today. So without any further ado, we would like to welcome Natasha Mahet-Sabin to the stage. She is climate change technology expert in the Climate Change and Food Security Unit at IPBES. And Natasha will tell us how to close the gap between technology providers and solution seekers that it is essential for real-world climate impact. Natasha, the floor is yours.
Thank you everyone for joining us here today, and good morning. Without further delay, I just go into the next slide. Okay, so we start here. When we look at this center image, we get the message immediately. So the world is shifting from green to gray due to the climate change. But we also see that the climate technologies are advancing very fast. We have so many technologies around us today. So we have renewables, we have electric vehicles, AI, and more. But despite all these innovations, the emissions are still rising and the climate impact is growing. So okay, I think we are stuck here. It's not coming anyways. Okay, anyways, maybe we can just continue. So the challenge basically is not innovation alone. It's the connection and deployment. Climate change cannot be addressed entirely or cannot be really addressed by simply pushing new technologies into the market. but by matching the real needs with the real solution at the right scale, at the right time, at the right place, which will really help the individuals and the policymakers. And this is basically the key insight that I will be presenting today. I'm presenting today. And this requires trust, visibility, and collaboration, not just new technologies. But we see that technology providers and solution seekers often work in silos. So as a result, the need owners, they do not see that what are the solutions available on one hand. And on the other hand, many technologies stay in labs, pilots do not scale, and the solutions arrive too late or not at all. And here basically comes in WIPO Green. We are a global marketplace that really helps connecting the people who are looking for solutions and the people who are providing the technologies. So we have the WIPO Green database. This is a global and free platform of not only the green technologies, but also the needs. And we are working in different sectors: energy, water, transportation, waste, and so on. So we have over 140,000 of green technologies in the database, and anyone can register and share their solutions and needs, and they also can use AI-based matchmaking tool. This is accessible in 164 languages. And then we have our flagship publication, which is a green technology book. We publish every year, showcasing clear and practical solutions to address the emerging climate challenges. So we have so far the editions on climate change adaptation, mitigation, energy solutions, disasters, and also this year we had a special edition on the energy solutions in Asia and the Pacific region. Just let me provide two quick examples of two technologies taken from the book. So this is a very simple technology. It's a power generating mat. So whenever you step on this mat, it generates power it generates electricity that can power small devices. So this really shows that how a simple innovation can turn your everyday movement into clean energy. And then this is a more complex one. This is a smart aquaculture vessel, which produces over 3 million fishes every year using the automated breeding tanks within the ship, so saving a lot of energy and transportation time. So these are all the solutions that you can access from the book and also from our digital version of the Green Technology book. So back to our work, we also work on acceleration projects, which are more like matchmaking projects, where we really connect the real need owners with the practical solution on the ground, working with the local partners. This is taken from one of the projects in Peru. They are testing the drone system for the crop farming. And finally, we work with partners. So we have over 160 partners and also the ambassador program to promote our work. And yeah, I finished my presentation with thanking you all and with thanks to our partners. And we welcome you to visit our booth to explore more. Thank you.
Around for questions afterwards. Okay, next speaker and last speaker in the session is Benedict Camden, who is the president and co-founder of the Interdisciplinary Institute for Environmental Health Research and Information. And I will read out the acronym for you as well, because I know you like acronyms. It's PIRSE, IHRI, and Benedict, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to talk about endocrine disruptors and how interdisciplinary science can inform effective policy incentive. It's here? Oh, okay, perfect. Thousands of endocrine disruptors are present in our everyday life products: children toys, plastics, food packaging, personal care items. These substances interfere with the hormonal systems, posing particular risks during critical developmental windows such as pregnancy and early childhood. Decades of peer-reviewed research demonstrate that endocrine disruptors alter, among others, reproductive health, thyroid regulation, and increase some cancer susceptibility.
Evidence suggests that they could also contribute to the global burden of non-communicable disease across populations. Endocrine disruptors present distinct toxicological features such as non-monotonic dose-response relation, indicate that low dose can produce significant biological effects. Research revealed diverse molecular structure and mechanism of action. Emerging evidence demonstrate that endocrine disruptors possess transgenerational effects through epigenetic mechanism. Moreover, early life exposure can lead to health consequences later in life as certain components accumulate in adipose tissue. The global plastic industry generates approximately $500 billion in annual revenue. Published estimates of social cost associated with phthalate exposure range from $510 billion to $3.74 trillion in years of life lost. Despite actual knowledge, regulatory frameworks on endocrine disruptors remain based on threshold responding to classical toxicological mechanism. This gap between contemporary scientific understanding and regulatory practice represents a persistent governance challenge. Scientific evidence on endocrine disrupting chemicals often remain in silos across disciplines and institutions. Unfortunately, this fragmentation creates structural barriers to comprehensive assessment and coordinated policy responses. Interdisciplinary approaches enable integrated understanding of endocrine disruptors whose impact traverse biological, environmental, and social systems. These substances operate across multiple regulatory domains and governance levels. A global perspective is necessary to capture all its complexity. Interdisciplinary collaboration fosters knowledge among specialists. When recommendations emerge from multi-sectoral consensus, they acquire enhanced legitimacy and policy influence. Due to endocrine disruptors' effects on organisms and ecosystems, an interdisciplinary approach is essential. Effective responses within the triple planetary require structured research policy dialogue. The Interdisciplinary Institute for Environmental Health Research and Information facilitates this science policy interface for evidence-informed decision-making. Thank you very much.
Please, one big round of applause for. And you will get around for questions, I assume. But now we're going to move over to our high-level panel. So those who are seated here, I suggest you just turn your chair around for now. Remember to turn it back again later, because we have one more round of lightning talks. But now we want to be focused here at this point, and I invite our high-level panelists to join me at the high-level panel. Good.
While we wait for the panelists to join this panel, I am trying to reach out to Jim and David online. If you can hear me, if you could open your cameras and we could quickly test sound before. We see you, Jim?
Yeah, I'm here. No problems.
You can hear, yeah, the colleagues confirm we can hear you. And David, I think we have been trying to make you open your camera and sound. David. So maybe Luzonto, where is he? No, c'est là-bas.
What's the promise?
It's David. David, we see you. So, and colleagues can hear you online. No, not
Hello.
well. I'm looking. Yes, it's perfect. Thank you so much. And now the light is there. Perfect. So Jane, we can start.
Wonderful. So you can see we're embracing all the wonderful technological innovations here with the colleagues in person in the room and other panelists joining us online, which hopefully we will be able to see when they speak. But first, a very warm welcome to our panelists here. And we would like to address the value of science policy interfaces for tackling the triple planetary crisis. So I will invite, as a first speaker, Dr. Co Barrett, who's the Deputy Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization. Co, I see you have some words prepared for us, but I do want to start with a bit of a tongue-in-cheek question. You know, in awkward social situations, a good golden rule is to talk about the weather. I hope that we're not in an awkward social situation here today. Why should we be talking about the weather in any case, in all situations? Co, welcome.
Hi, Jane. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the question. I think we talk about the weather because it's something that we all can have in common, right? So it's a nice icebreaker because it's something we all experience. Of course, the weather is, a key piece of our experience of our environment and is intricately linked to longer-term climate and issues like that, which are kind of at the center of some of our conversations today. Did you want me to go on more than that, Jane, or was that your icebreaker?
Please, it was my icebreaker, but please, I invite you to share the comments that you prepared. Thanks.
I actually haven't prepared like formal comments, but I just wanted to share maybe for this group who may not be entirely familiar with the WMO that we are celebrating our 75th anniversary this year. Although we are a much older organization building on a previous non-UN based organization, and we're the specialized agency dealing with weather, climate, and water. Our bread and butter is kind of coordinated observation networks that provide a finger on the pulse for the planet. And also providing data and information in a free and open way, so that everybody can access this. And we're quite proud of our ability to have done this over the course of our existence, despite challenging geopolitical times, including world wars, because we feel that no one can really go it alone when it comes to data. We really need each other, and we need to share information on what's happening all around the planet, so that we can each kind of use that information for our own purposes. And that's particularly important at the science policy interface, where more and more it's clear that unbiased, trusted, authoritative information is really the basis for sound decision-making. In our case, among the triple planetary crisis, we're mostly focused on the climate place, the climate space. But it's really important that we underpin important policy decisions with solid scientific information. And from our perspective, that connection to policy also helps us to make our work relevant. So it's a kind of a two-way street where we each benefit. Thank you.
Thanks, Co. So, Co, I completely agree. And to me, that basically means the scientists have to also sometimes step out of that ivory tower, right? And to come to events like this one here, to meet and speak with policymakers. But for some scientists, that can feel a little bit out of their comfort zone. You have such an impressive track record of working at the science policy interface. Are there sometimes situations where you feel uncomfortable as a scientist? And what's your trick, if you can share that with other scientists, how to, approach policymakers and to speak with them? Are there some tricks and tips you can share?
I think everybody has to find their own tricks. For my tricks, maybe I'm embarrassed to say that even though I am often a voice for science, I myself am not very interested in talking from the perspective of facts and figures. It's important to put enough of them into conversation so that people understand that you're working from a scientific basis. But sometimes scientists shy away from talking about feelings, but feelings really are what kind of get the point across, right? So for myself, I like to talk about how I sometimes feel challenged by the way that I experience the environment, and not only just keeping to the facts and figures always.
Yeah, that's very, very wise words. I agree, because it's emotions that connect us, not facts and well, sometimes facts and figures, but and the weather. Good. Okay, turning over to you, Jim. Jim Scare is we had a chair that broke here. I hope everything's okay. Yeah, good. Sorry, Jim. I can see you now. I guess I have to look here. Hi, Jim. Welcome. You are the chair of the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I guess everyone has heard about IPCC. It's very, very well known. Also because in 2007, the IPCC won the Peace Nobel Prize. And I don't know, any members of IPCC in the room who were part of, okay, well, congratulations. And we know that getting a Peace Nobel Prize is very desirable. Some world leaders are striving to that. Jim, what are your recommendations for how to win a Peace Nobel Prize? And how has winning this prize shaped the work that you are doing? How has it helped you? Or maybe it hasn't.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I'm sure there are many people in different parts of the world who would like advice on how to get a Nobel Peace Prize, and I wouldn't deign to you actually make these recommendations. I was actually prompted for this by two questions, and one of them was about strengthening science policy interfaces, and the other one was about my journey from being a Scottish scientist and academic to IPCC chair. And if you don't mind, I'll take the second question first. And just to say that I have not stopped being a Scottish scientist and an academic. There's nothing incompatible with that and being an IPCC chair. But just to mention, that throughout my career, I think it's been characterized by interdisciplinarity, crossing between scientific disciplines. Although my first degree is in physics, 30 years ago, I was director of the UK Economic and Social Research Council's Global Environmental Change Programme. And following that, I was director of the UK's Energy Research Centre, just as the UK rediscovered energy policy. And I was heavily involved in engaging electrical engineers, economists, regulatory specialists in making recommendations on electricity market reform, which has resulted in, the UK's huge expansion of renewable energy. So I've been very much used to, pulling different disciplines together. And just to say, following both of these, I was on the UK's Committee on Climate Change that recommended the ambitious climate targets, and I chaired a Just Transition Commission in Scotland for 5 years. And I have to say, all of that experience has really helped me navigate what you might call the grey zone between science and policy, between policy prescription and policy relevance, which is a very hard place to handle. And it had really helped me in the last IPCC cycle when I was co-chair of IPCC on Working Group 3 on mitigation, which is probably the most politically exposed of IPCC's working groups. But just on this question of strengthening science policy interfaces, as you've suggested, IPCC is not the new kid on the block. We are roughly half the age of WMO. We've been around for 37 years now. And I would argue that IPCC is already a very strong body. We had huge impact in the last cycle with our special report on 1.5 degrees, for example. But that strength needs to be managed very carefully in a world where multilateralism is under pressure. And it may be suspected that science could be co-opted to support particular interests or causes. And the big point for me, and I think I'm going to echo what Co said here, is we do need to stick to the science. We need to communicate it impartially. And to echo my colleague Abdallah Moqsit, who I think spoke earlier, we need to ensure that diverse points of views and perspectives are informing our findings. And just to say, my view is that our job is to provide the foundations for policy. It's not to guide it necessarily. That's a place where we need to be very, very careful. And of course, operationally, we can always improve the way things we do. We now have rough parity between men and women in the IPCC, and we have a rough balance between developed and developing country contributors. Now, we need to focus on other issues, including making sure that more diverse knowledge systems are engaged. And I'd recall that our procedures don't talk about scientists, it talks about experts, and expertise can lie outside the laboratory and outside the university, which is why we're thinking about processes for better engagement of indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, and practitioner knowledge. And just as a final point, because I know my colleague David Abura from IPBES is going to come on afterwards, we need to think about how the different science policy interfaces can support each other. On one point I would like to make there, our scientific communities are actually relatively joined up. The same scientists can support both IPBES and IPCC, and the new chemicals panel will have a lot of overlap with IPCC scientific communities as well. I think the challenge is for the intergovernmental science policy interfaces to get more joined up, because frankly, I think the scientists are actually doing a reasonably good job at it at the moment, if you look at the scientific literature. So that's probably enough from me to get things started, and I'll stop my remarks there.
Thank you so much, Jim. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome David Obura, who's the chair of IPBES. David is also joining us online. David, I guess you are in Kenya, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here today. David, we've now heard that IPBES is the second newest kid on the block, 13 years of IPBES. Could you share with us, please, why it's important that we strengthen science policy interfaces, especially in today's challenging times?
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and talk alongside Jim Ski. We were in Nairobi last week at UNEA, also talking with the very new kid on the block, the new panel on chemicals and waste. And it's great to see not quite a proliferation, but the expansion of science policy interfaces because of the importance of science. Now, 13 years of IPBES, where have we come from? And really, I think the key thing for us is in our name, Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And I like to explain this as nature and nature supporting people. And it's a very complex topic to address in the environmental space that we're in. To support our science, we identified the need to develop a conceptual framework right at the beginning because of the complexity of people's interactions with nature. And this really identified nature and nature's contributions to people as being the key dimensions supporting a good quality of life, and then various indirect and direct drivers. And this framework has guided all of our assessments from that point. I think in talking about the triple planetary crisis and our contributions to resolving it, I think our framework does help really identify where our work dovetails with, for example, the IPCC and climate change being one of the drivers. Chemicals and wastes, that's what the pollution driver in our conceptual framework. And this really helps identify how we can bring our knowledge together and integrate better to support decision making. A key framework we've had from the beginning is including multiple values of nature and different worldviews from different cultures, and the inclusion of indigenous and local knowledge, and working out how to blend natural and social sciences with indigenous and local knowledge to support decision-making across scales. We had a first round of assessments to the global assessment that sort of set the scene for us, and our first global assessment produced in 2019 really provided, the first global results that put IPBES's name on the map. And since then, we've had a second round of assessments essentially we established a rolling work program because of the complexity of the issues around nature and people to identify critical work that needed to be done, and our conceptual framework helping us do that. We've had various topics such as on sustainable use and values and invasive species. And I think it's interesting to note for stakeholders in particular that the last two assessments that we approved in December 2024 and one that is coming to our plenary in February 2026. So these are on nexus interlinkages between different sectors, nature and economic sectors. The transformative change assessment and the business and biodiversity assessment really look at the challenges that we face from a societal actor perspective. So from economic actors, how do you make decisions if you're in an economic sector and you're dependent on nature and have impacts on nature? How can those actions be rationalized to minimize our footprint? We have a second global assessment, which will come out in 2028. Now, I think this is a critical part for us is to strengthen the science policy interfaces in today's challenging times. And I'd like to sort of communicate this around IPBES's contributions really being around how nature supports economy and society. Our conceptual framework is very robust, is very good for synthesizing knowledge, but it is a bit hard to communicate, but it really does identify all the different ways in which actors and their influences and their dependencies on nature connect around the planet across local scales and from local to global scales and the planetary or Earth system crises that we face now, and how we can really identify actions to help decision makers. Countries are our primary clients, of course. Our plenary and our members are all countries. How they can make decisions, but then also decision makers in companies and down to local levels to return within sustainability limits, and how these actions are differentiated by location as well as by actor type as well. And then perhaps I'll finish, as Jim mentioned, we were asked to talk about our personal journeys in coming to these global platforms. I'm a Kenyan marine ecologist working on coral reefs. And I've also always had a very clear sense of nature in people's lives, of people's dependence through small-scale fisheries and how these are impacted by climate change and other pressures, and the broader context of conservation or biodiversity science and people with nature rather than antagonistic views of people against nature or cordoning nature away from people. I think in that sense, IPBES's science framework really is the framework that helps us address these challenges very comprehensively. Our transformative change assessment identified 3 underlying causes of the situation that we're in, sort of systems of domination, inequalities amongst people and countries, and the temporal outcomes, whether we should focus on short-term versus long-term outcomes. And I think this scientific framework is just right at this critical juncture for what we are challenged with as a global society and down to local scales. And I look forward to doing, what we can in IPBES to contribute to and strengthen the science policy interfaces with the other bodies as well, and in the multilateral space for decisions to be integrated to global levels. So thank you. I think I'll end with that then.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, David. And you and Jim were both in Nairobi. Ko, were you there also? No. Okay, so we will turn now to someone who will report back directly from UNEA, Stephen. But before I give you the mic, I want to invite Ko, Jim, and David to please think about what you would like to get from governments to support your work better. And I also want to invite the community here in the room. We heard a lot about how important community is. So inviting you here in the room, if you have any questions that you would like to ask our distinguished panelists. But before we get to that, please, Stephen, the floor is yours. Tell us, please, what you would like to share from UNEA. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Jane. Yeah, pleasure to be here. Still recovering from UNEA. It was funny when I went down to Nairobi, I was thinking, I am looking forward to this because it is so cold in Europe. And I kept my gloves on the coffee table every day because I looked at them and I said, I'm so glad to be in Nairobi. But, very challenging set of negotiations over 2 weeks. Very, very challenging, very difficult. That was to be expected and very successful. at the end. Successful, why? Because we had a ministerial declaration that was adopted by all. Some did not associate themselves with the declaration, that's their choice, but all who were present signed on, and that's very important. The ministerial declaration also highlighted GEO7. So GEO7 was launched last week. It was picked up in media outlets across the world. It had a very important message. The message, not unfamiliar to you, is that we're basically off track on meeting a lot of our agreements, the multilateral agreements, the Paris Agreement, the Nature Agreement, and also the Global Framework on Chemicals, recently minted in Bonn in 2023. Now we have a Global Framework on Chemicals, and yet we know that novel entities are pushing through the planetary boundaries. So difficult, but successful in terms of UNEA 7. I wanted to say a few things about science at UNEA 7 because it was really interesting. We heard from Jim, we heard from David, we had others there, Andrea Hinwood, UNEP's chief scientist, moderating a panel also with Tessa McGovers, who is in a way the midwife for the Science Policy Panel on Pollution Prevention, which was adopted by governments, by member states in Uruguay earlier this year to take it forward. So that's very, very important. We've heard it referred to as the new kid on the block. It is the new kid on the block in a way, and it's a very important new kid because it's about toxicity. And toxicity is kind of invisible. Nature, you sort of feel when it's moving or missing. Climate, you can't escape it. That's why we talk about it. And Ko, your remarks were so spot on. Toxicity is not really easy to see, but it hits us. And it hits us over time, and it hits our children, it hits our genetics, it hits our ability to reproduce. It's critical, it's mission critical. So the new Intergovernmental Panel on Science for Chemicals, Waste, and Pollution will be very, very important. And of course, the first plenary is here in Geneva in February, which will establish the rules and procedures. Now, one word on that. You know, there was a really interesting discussion at UNEA 7 where all of the science policy panels came together. And the one thing that jumped out at that for me was you've got to get it right in terms of rules and procedures. Because if you don't, you're not going to get to the science. You're going to get to controversy. So I thought that was really, really interesting. So it's not just about, you know, something small. The rules and procedures are very, very important. We're looking forward to that event here in Geneva in February. We thank very much Switzerland for hosting that very important plenary, which will happen in February. I did want to say two other things very, very quickly, Jane. One is the baby brother of climate, nature, and now pollution panels is perhaps what's called the International Resources Panel, also hosted by UNEP and looks at material flow. One of the 5 system changes that GEO7 called for is on materials and waste, essentially circularity. And the IRP looks at metabolism of resources into goods and services and the footprints that derive from it. So very interesting to see the baby brother of the 3, Inger Andersen calls it the trifecta, but a very important one. I think the last thing I want to say, because I know Jacqueline is here to my left, and she's not only helping to midwife the Science Policy Panel on Pollution Prevention, the Intergovernmental Panel, but also IPEA, which is the independent panel for AMR. It's looking at AMR. And that's another very important science space because of what AMR can potentially do, and antimicrobial resistance. It also featured very importantly in UNEA 7. It's not a done deal, but it's a very important space that we need to look at very, very carefully. So that's the report from Nairobi from last week. Difficult, challenging, successful science, objective science, impartial science, credible science, more important than ever.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for that very matter of fact, but still encouraging report back. The acronym AMR has fallen a few times this morning, and I feel like it's my kind of role to help people understand it's antimicrobial resistance. That's obviously a really important one. And what I also take from you, Stephen, is that we don't only have the weather in common, but we also have toxicity in common. So maybe that can also be a bit of an icebreaker topic now for those conversations. Could also be a bit overwhelming. Okay, Ko, Jim, and David, back to you. Could I get a brief statement from you, please? What would be your wish what would be the help that you would like to receive from governments to make your work even more effective and impactful? And I think we will start with David first.
Okay, thank you very much. So very briefly, what we would like from IPBES, we have 152 members. We'd love all countries to become members. We need the critical financial support so our work can be sustained over multiple years for longevity. But I think now, critically important, we're in this science policy interface, and we really need the multilateral space to be recognized as being critical for global decisions, as important now as when it was instigated, but it does need updating. And our assessments, the science and knowledge, whether from us on climate change to you and others, does provide essential foundational knowledge on priorities to address. And we hope to contribute to that process.
Good. Well, I grant you your wish. I hope countries that aren't members yet will consider that decision in the next year. Jim, to you, what would be your wish? How could government support you?
And just to say, I'm sure you won't be able to grant my wishes here as they come up. The first one would be that our agreements, that our countries could agree on a timeline for the next report. Felix knows all about that, and that would be the first very big wish that we have. It would really keep the scientists very happy. But to take it slightly more broadly, I think the big help that we could get is some clear messaging about the degree of synergy and cooperation between the different science policy interfaces. I think there have been very strong signals from the IPBES side, more ambiguous signals, if I can put it that way, from the IPCC side on collaboration. So that clarity from the governments would be helpful. As I said earlier, the scientists are already collaborating. The barriers are more on the government side, in my view.
Great. Thank you, Jim. And I, of course, I can't grant you your wish, but I can grant you to hear back from Felix, who we will hear back from in a moment on your request. But before we will go to Co. Co, how can governments make your work at World Meteorological Organization, that's been around for 50 years now, 75 years. I got confused with CITES. 75 years. It's going quite well, no? Or does the relationship need a bit of care?
There's always room for improvement. I would say the most important thing that we would ask for is not to take this global backbone of observations and data exchange for granted. It almost feels like it's magic. We look at our phones, we get the weather every day, but the whole network that goes into providing updated observations within seconds, actually, updated to a kind of a global network that inform forecasts across the planet, it needs care and feeding. And it's easy to kind of overlook that could potentially go away. And, you really need this kind of continuous, comparable, authoritative data to inform not only weather, but climate extremes and a whole host of things that we experience in an increasing way, hazards, etc. And it's key to providing early warning, which is an initiative that we help to lead for the UN Secretary General, which is getting information into the hands of communities before they experience the extremes from climate or disasters. So, thanks.
Thank you, Co. Good. So I promised we would take a question from the audience. Is there one? Yeah. Do we have a runner with the mic? And I please ask you to keep your question short. Do introduce yourself, please, because it's important to know who is asking questions. And please also ask who the question is for, and we'll have a quick response to that. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Dorota Bartelska from Formation Climat. And I have a question to VMO. We know that the climate is destabilized. Like in 2023, we saw a rapid increase in temperature. And my question is, what is the highest increase of temperature we could see in a year, within a year in this destabilized climate in 10 or 20 years? What's the highest yearly jump of temperature we could see?
Thank you. Thank you, Cope. Can you take that one?
Wow, I wish I had that crystal ball. And I will say, as you pointed out, 2024 was the hottest year on record. And it was the hottest year on record by far. It wasn't only climate. We had some other kind of climate variability kind of patterns that were playing, but it was very much climate because 11 of the last 11 years have been the 11 most warm years on the planet. So at least in modern observations. I think it's pretty clear that we are on a trend that is not going to stop soon. We really need to get mitigation under control if we're going to turn this curve. With action, we can make a difference, and we can keep those temperature increases to kind of a lower threshold, but I hesitate to actually put a prediction on the table because it really depends on the action that we all take.
Excuse me? Sorry. I think we're going to move on. Are there any member states that have questions? I mean, we all have questions, but if there's a member state, no, I don't see any. Okay, then with that, I give the word to Sonia.
Yeah. No, I have a question, Sonia Seneviratne. I'm IPCC Working Group 1 Vice Chair, and maybe I take the opportunity that there are so many representatives, both from the institutions and also from countries, to ask some question to which extent are the mechanisms still really working in the way we would like to? So we have seen that in some of the panels, it's a case in IPCC, but recently also in the GEO panels, there have been difficult situations. And sometimes it comes to the fact that you always need to have consensus. And so then just a few maybe actors can slow down the process. I do wonder, should we revisit this within those institutions? That's the question I do have.
Sonia, thank you so much. That's an excellent question. In the interest of time, I will defer to Felix and give him the opportunity to answer that question if he wants to. But Felix, you actually wanted to speak about something else, which is a statement that you read on behalf of Switzerland and 59 other countries at UNEA last week, reminding UNEA delegates of the importance of science. And maybe you can also comment on the question that Sonia had.
Thank you very much, and happy to do so. So perhaps let me start with the question what you have asked now, why is for governments the science policy interface so important? And to put it very simply, no, we have, for policy making, first of all, you need the science, you need the knowledge. But also we have to know what is around and also where are the gaps. Secondly, we have able to access those informations. I just recently learned we have 13,000 studies about chemicals every year. So no government by itself, almost no government can digest them all. So this is also part of the process. And third, we have to be able to use it, those informations, to trigger policy options. And that's why science policy interfaces are so important to us. Because I think they are really the reference point for governments for this best available science. They're able to assess science and translate those complex research into options. They're not policy prescriptive, but policy relevant. And they trigger action. They trigger action of the global level by informing the conventions, the frameworks that we have, but also national level, also trigger actions and also coherence among different ministries. For us, also very important is when we talk about science, we don't talk about only nature science, we talk about social science, economy, health, so all the different aspects that we have to have. And also SPIs are living ecosystems. And there you go, perhaps to the question also of Sonia. I think ecosystems, that means we have an environment. That's we're so happy also to have this kind of environment like in this house where there are interactions possible. And I think also that science is really, we fully trust, what also Stephen Stone has mentioned, the rules that we have. How to make sure that we know it is credible. And for me, there are different elements. I think what we have seen recently, this kind of pushback against science. We have seen different elements. We had the GEO7, where member states were not able to agree on a summary for policymakers. For me, that also shows how sensitive those areas are now. It's not granted and given that we're able to do those. So we need the right procedures there. And from the Swiss side, we can always say consensus does not mean a veto right. consensus, like the emerging opinion, and I think there, like we have also heard from the ministerial declaration, there are, if somebody cannot support a certain element, he can dissociate the different elements for that. But I think also we have to be really generous about that to understand if there's a common findings in there, we have to accept them. So we say science is not negotiable. And sometimes science is also uncomfortable because they show us certain things as policymakers that are not easy to work on, but we have to take that on, and the solution cannot be to reject those findings. That is very important for us. We also have seen at the COP30 that there was a pushback against, for example, scientific references from the IPCC in certain decision documents, and we are very much worried about that. We believe that science policy interfaces, they play a key role. They have, for example, also to be well resourced. It's also very important they can do their work. They have to be inclusive so that we have scientists, member states from all over the world can fully participate. That is very key. And for that, we also have developed at UNEA, at the latest hours, a statement supported by totally 60 countries. We have formulated like 3 of key asks we are trying to defend overall. And first, that means we have to recognize the role of science to address the planetary crisis that we have. And that means also defending the role of science means defending of evidence-based decision-making. Secondly, that we have to protect scientific integrity. That means no political or financial interferences. Science must remain independent, policy relevant, but not policy prescriptive. And we have to be sure it's credible and effective. And third, also to underline the role of science policy interfaces, that we need strong and inclusive science policy interfaces for informed decision-making. And member states should reinforce transparent, well-resourced interfaces that integrate scientific expertise, including indigenous knowledge, to guide sustainable development. And we are now in the way to launch a group of Friends of Science based on this effort in UNEA. The idea is that we have a network of interested member states to always look before we go to negotiations to check on the role of science in that process to make sure that the voice of science is heard and also integrity of science is respected. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much for those very clear and also inspiring words. I say that as a scientist who's also engaged in the UNEA MEA space. We look forward to learning more about and from the group of Friends of Science. And with that, we have a jam-packed program this morning. I want to invite you to those who are sitting over there, stand up, turn your chairs around, please, because the action will continue over there now with our third set of lightning talks. And once those 3 talks are over, the fair will continue. So please, let's go over there. Thank you. Good. So we have reorganized the room. I just realized I forgot to thank our panelists, Jim and David. Thank you so much. I hope you can stick around a little bit more. And Jim and David, all the best to you. And thank you for joining online. So now we will launch into our third round of lightning talks. And I'm very excited to have here Nicola Schönenberger, who is the director of the Conservatory and Botanical Gardens of the City of Geneva. I know you also work with CITES, that is 50 years old this year, right? And you're going to present World Flora Online, an essential tool for conservation. And you have the microphone, 3.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Okay, should work. The clicker is here. Okay.
It's right there.
A flora is a list of all plant species growing spontaneously in a certain area. And I'm a very classical, traditional botanist. I'm a pupil of Linnaeus. It's a science that exists since over 300 years. The flora includes correct scientific names and synonyms, morphological descriptions, images, distribution maps, conservation status, ecological characteristics, uses, and vernacular names of the species known. With this project, we aim to create and curate a global flora. Today, around 380,000 different plant species are known globally. The World Flora Online aims at compiling ETL data for 80% of those species by 2030 and publish it online. Today, we're around 50%. However, another roughly 100,000 species are unknown to science, that's over 20%, and await scientific description. On the other hand, 40% of all plants are threatened with extinction. They are in red lists of the IUCN. The reasons being habitat loss, overexploitation and illegal trade, pollution, climate change, and invasive alien species. There is your triple crisis. Here, I show you the Franklin tree, a member of the tea family, native to southeastern United States and extinct in the wild. About 600 plant species have gone extinct in the last 250 years. This documented number is considered a significant underestimate, as many species haven't been searched again in recent times, and several species may have never been described in the first place. We also know that the extinction rate today is much higher than the rate of description of new species. In other words, biodiversity is lost even before being discovered. Here you see Labramia samiana from Madagascar, a tree that was newly described by my team here in Geneva. The species is endangered because of its wood that is logged and sold nationally and internationally. In fact, 75% of all newly described plant species are threatened with extinction. That's a very high proportion. Describing a species and giving it a scientific name is like giving it a right of existence. It's like a birth certificate. Without this fundamental action, the threat status cannot be assessed, and the species cannot be included in a checklist, on a red list, or in a law, which would enable its protection. In other words, describing biodiversity is the first essential step to safeguard it. The World Flora Online is a global consortium of 56 botanic gardens and botanical institutions worldwide. It is a growing network creating a bridge between fundamental science and application, between taxonomy and conservation. All major botanical institutions in the world participate. Here you see the logos. I'm at my end. And we recently created the World Flora Association in Geneva here to give it a consolidated governance. And if you are interested in supporting us in saving the plant world, please don't hesitate to come around at the Botanic Garden. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicola, and I'm sorry to chase you through the 3.5 minutes. But that is the format that we have here today, so we can suck up as much knowledge as possible. So next speaker this morning is Tobias Brosch. He is professor at the University of Geneva and the chair for psychology of sustainable development, which I find incredibly intriguing. So let's look forward to your presentation. Great.
Thank you. Yes, so thank you for the introduction. So yeah, as she said, I'm a professor for psychology at the University of Geneva. I'm also a lead author in the new assessment cycle of the IPCC, and so I just survived the first lead author meeting that was earlier this month in Paris. So you might ask, what's a psychologist doing at the IPCC, right? Why does the IPCC need a psychologist? And I actually did get this question a couple of times, not so much from the scientists, but more from the policymaker side, who were, I guess, amused by the idea that I would arrive there with a couch and do psychotherapy for everybody. But that's actually not why I was there. I was there because, I mean, climate change is often framed as a problem of the natural sciences or of technology. But I would say by now in 2025, it's more of a behavioral problem. Why is that? Because climate change or emissions are produced or avoided, if you want, through millions of daily decisions, right, that are made by individuals, by people in organizations, by people in institutions, by politicians who are also people, even though we sometimes don't think about them like that. And in terms of the technical level, I mean, we know what needs to be done to address climate change, right? The climate science is clear. We have tons and tons of technical solutions, of policy pathways that we know we should implement, but then we stop at this gap and we're like, well, okay, we're just not doing it. So the implementation falls short. And this is, I think, where the behavioral sciences come in and can play a very important role. Because if we want climate policies to work, we need to understand how humans, how Homo sapiens actually think, feel, decide, and act. And behavioral sciences, I think they draw attention to the fact that we are not this rational actor type who just integrates information to make optimal decisions, but more looks at how people actually behave in the real world. And so, for example, research shows that people systematically undervalue outcomes that lie in the far future as compared to what's happening right now, which obviously is a big, big problem in the context of climate action, where most of the benefits are far in the future, but all the inconvenience that come are right here, right now. That's a big problem. At the same time, it's a systematical bias implemented in our brains. We also know that people are loss averse, which means that they are more sensitive to losses than to gains of the same size. This, again, it's a major psychological barrier that can make people reluctant to move towards a different lifestyle, because we don't like to lose what we already have compared to gaining maybe some other improvement that might come with it. Emotions also, right? We are not only Spock-like rational beings with emotions such as fear, anger, guilt, hope. They already came up a couple of times today, and they are strong drivers of our attention, of our motivation, of our action. So behavioral science also highlights that emotions are, I mean, they are omnipresent in what we do. They are not really the absolute solution to everything, nor are they always an obstacle, but we have to understand what they do, and we have to see, well, how can we use those in the context of promoting sustainable, large-scale behavior change? Almost done. So my experience at the science policy interface shows that there's usually a lot of demand for those behavioral insights, but it also shows that they are often integrated at a relatively late stage. So even today, in the context of those lightning talks, I'm the second to last person. A coincidence? I don't know. But so what I'm saying is, if we manage to integrate behavioral science from the start, policies can actually be designed to anticipate those forms of reactance, of resistance, to leverage the psychological dynamics that we know, and to also improve policy uptake. So one concrete example is a project that my group is conducting here with Beyond Lab, which is a UN-based think tank for sustainability, where we're working on the HOPE method, which is supposed to be a strategy to leverage hope, to drive action, to shape new habits, and to push critical thinking. And so the notion is to actually deliver a practical tool to the UN ecosystem, which can be used to design workshops, to shape policy design, and potential policy campaigns. In the context of the IPCC, so here these are all those wonderful and crazy people who were in Paris earlier December. You can also see the chair just in front here. So For AI7, I think, or maybe I hope, right, that behavioral sciences can contribute in three major ways, like by synthesizing what we know on policies that work for humans, right, not for rational actors, but for us humans, to clarify which policies can be accepted, which can be politically feasible because we can implement them without starting a Gilets jaunes movement or whatever for the totally wrong reasons, and to integrate human behavior more explicitly into climate scenarios, response pathways, and also maybe in the way that we write the report so that what we write down becomes more accessible and more actionable. So wrapping up here, so we do need strong science policy interfaces to address all those crises, and a perspective that considers the functioning and also the quirks of humans, I think, is indispensable. So integrating behavioral sciences explicitly in those interfaces is, in my opinion, not a luxury, but it's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tobias. The temporal discounting, we all know that as we move to the holidays and we think, oh, I have another piece of chocolate and another cookie, and then you pay the price in January. Okay, next speaker in this final session is Ziad Zalab, who's the president of the Science Policy Action Network, SPAN, and a researcher at EPFL in Lausanne. And Ziad, you have 3.5 minutes. And the mic.
Yes. So we just thought we'd add another acronym to the evening. So thank you for the introduction and thank you for the organization and inviting us here. So we are the Science Policy Action Network, or SPAN for short. We are a student association on the OPFL campus, and our goal is really to guide students and young researchers to navigate the science policy interface. So I'd like to start by an interesting and concerning statistics where we see that in surveys, in global surveys, and in our own surveys for student population on campus, we see that the overall opinion on the science policy and the science advice system in our countries really lacks a lot of things. And there's a lot to be desired, and there's a lot more that scientists and policymakers can do to make the system better. This is especially important since we are living through the triple planetary crisis that brings us all to here today. And as we've heard from many of the talks and also the discussion, it requires a lot of scientific input to guide evidence-based policy that can tackle these challenges. So we went back on campus and we tried to figure out what are the obstacles that are preventing young scientists and students from engaging in science policy interfaces. And what we've identified is that there are three major obstacles. The first one is lack of awareness. So in many technical universities like EPFL, the students are taught how to tackle these sustainability issues from a scientific side, but not necessarily from the policy side. The second obstacle is a lack of interest. So many students don't really see science advice as part of their future careers. And the final obstacle is that even if the students are motivated and they would like to engage in the science policy interface, they most often lack the tools and the shared vocabulary to communicate with policymakers. So this is where SPAN comes in. Our goal as a student association is really to tackle these obstacles on campus and to provide students with all of the tools to overcome these obstacles. So to tackle the lack of awareness, we organize these outreach events where we invite experts in the domains on both the science side and the policy-making side to come and tell us about their experiences and to really tell us and teach us about the challenges they are facing at the science policy interface and how we can overcome them. The second part is to tackle the lack of interest. So for this, we organize networking events where we invite early career scientists that are engaged in science policy advice to come and tell us about their experiences, how they were able to break through into this, transitioning from their roles as purely scientists and researchers to also come in and advise policymakers. We also organize networking events that with the goal to really grow a community for young researchers to help themselves support each other navigating the science policy interface. And finally, all of this wouldn't be possible without action. So the most important part of our association is that we organize workshops to give the students the necessary tools so that they can engage in science policy discourse. This is done by organizing workshops for negotiation skills, for example, but something like policy briefs, where we collaborated with a lot of case studies providers so that the students can really engage in this hands-on and publish the policy briefs like with the ones we published on our website. Our next major project is that we're going to work with EPFL professors to help get the accreditation for the UNFCCC so that we can send students and young researchers from EPFL to participate in climate conferences and they can see firsthand how climate negotiations are taking place. So I have to say we're a pretty young organization. We've only been around for a year and a half, but we've managed to reach almost 10% of the PhD population on campus. And it's our goal to reach even more and even expand into other universities. So if you'd like to join us on this journey, and I think my time is up, please find us in the fair. Thank you.
Okay, so wonderful. Please stay here. And can we have Tobias and Jaka, please, also? Here and Nicola, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's because you see, Jen is making me work hard here. So round of applause for our speakers, please. Excellent. Good. And now, again, I invite you to turn your chairs around because we will be heading back to the next panel on recent and upcoming milestones in addressing the triple planetary crisis. And this time it will be our wonderful colleagues from the Geneva Environment Network who will be moderating. Diana, I'm looking for you. Are you ready? Harvey, yeah? Okay, good. So we will kick off the next panel in a second.
And I kindly ask our panel to join us. Claudia, can you go and grab Jacqueline outside? Thank you. So that we can start on time. Very good. So we are now going to discuss I see that people, it's a real marathon and people are outside grabbing some coffee and try to rest. We are now going to discuss very concrete upcoming milestones for our scientific panels. This is what we are good at doing at GEN, is to prepare member states and other stakeholders to upcoming negotiations. So I will have the pleasure to moderate this session with Yasmin Awad, who is also with the Geneva Environment Network team. And we really are happy to take this great opportunity today to have of this dedicated day on science policy to look at these upcoming plenaries of our trifecta of panels addressing the planetary crisis. But before we hear from the heads of the secretariat of the panels, we will also look at another important milestone, the upcoming meeting of the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, or the UN Conference on Biodiversity, which will take place in Armenia next year. We are joined today by Her Excellency, Ambassador Tolmojan, the permanent representative of the Republic of Armenia to the United Nations office here in Geneva and to other also international organizations. So as I mentioned, Armenia is hosting the upcoming COP17 on biological diversity in October next year. You were already with us in May this year, Excellency, where we were celebrating the International Biodiversity Day and where we unpacked the latest reports of IPBES. That were launched exactly 1 year ago now. So as we prepare for COP17, let's hear from you why science matters. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Liana. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to participate in today's Science Policy Day organized by the Geneva Environment Network in Switzerland and to reflect on how science policy interfaces can help us respond more effectively to the triple planetary crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution. Armenia highly values this timely discussion, particularly as it takes place in the lead up to several important global milestones, including the inaugural plenary of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Panel on Chemical, Waste and Pollution, the upcoming plenaries of Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And looking slightly ahead, the 70th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, COP17, which Armenia will have the honor to host in October 2026. And these milestones are not isolated events. They represent a growing maturity of the science policy architecture. As host of COP17, we see science as a foundation for the negotiations. Science matters because it gives credibility and coherence to our collective action. Without strong, trusted, and inclusive science policy interfaces, our decisions risk being fragmented, short-sighted, and disconnected from realities on the ground. Our vision for biodiversity protection is integrated, science-driven, and community-focused. We believe that conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity must be informed by the best available scientific data, while also recognizing indigenous and local knowledge, national circumstances, and socio-economic realities. In this regard, Armenia appreciates the important work of IPBES in providing evidence-based guidance for the implementation of global biodiversity commitments. Panel's assessment have significantly enhanced our understanding of biodiversity trends, drivers of loss, and pathways for transformative changes. As we move towards COP17, the incoming presidency of Armenia looks forward to see how IPBES findings are helping to advance policy discussions and decision-making, both in the preparatory process and during the COP itself. That is especially important, taking into account the fact that the CBD COP17 in Yerevan next year is mandated to deliver the crucial milestone of the first global review of collective progress in implementing the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, with a view to assess the current state of implementation, identify the gaps, and chart the most effective pathways for the achievement of the targets and objectives of the GBA by 2030 and 2050, respectively. This important milestone can be delivered only if our efforts for the global review are backed by a sound foundation of science that will help drive and devise effective policy solutions. Ahead of the triple COP year, Armenia also attaches great importance to synergies among three major science policy bodies, just like among the multilateral environmental agreements. The triple planetary crisis is deeply interconnected. Climate change accelerates biodiversity loss, biodiversity degradation weakens climate resilience, and pollution undermines both ecosystem, land, and human health. This is what scientific evidence tells us, and accordingly, if these challenges are reinforcing the triple planetary crisis, then we should also redouble our efforts towards coherent implementation of multilateral environmental agreements, which can be further reinforced by a strong bond of synergy among the three science policy panels. COP17 in Armenia offers an opportunity to strengthen coherence across these processes. By bringing together biodiversity, climate, land, and pollution perspectives, we can foster more integrated solutions. Armenia, as an incoming presidency, envisions COP17 as a turning point for science-driven policy choices to guide the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework in a manner that is climate-sensitive and pollution-aware, and serve as a moment of convergence, translating scientific knowledge into accountable outcomes and practical choice for a better future. As host country, Armenia is committed to creating space at COP17 for dialogue between scientists, policymakers, indigenous peoples, and local communities, youth, and other stakeholders. We aim to promote discussions that are forward-looking, solution-oriented, and grounded in evidence. To conclude, let me invite you all to Armenia next October to jointly make sure that science remains at the heart of our collective efforts to halt biodiversity loss, address climate change, and eliminate pollution for the health of our planet and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for these wise and encouraging words. Many colleagues here look forward to join our CPD colleagues in Armenia next year. Let's now move on by chronological order on what to expect in the upcoming sessions of the panels. And we will start not with Geneva, but with what's happening in the UK, in Manchester, in February next year, which is actually the same week where many people will be busy here in Geneva. So we are moving, we will start with IPBES, which 12th plenary will take place in Manchester in February, the first week of February next year. So I'm turning to Mr. Lutando Dziba that we had already the opportunity to hear earlier today for him to brief us on the upcoming expected outcomes and more what is in preparation. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'd like to perhaps take a quick moment just to introduce IPBES, because I know that we come from diverse communities, and I think it's good so that we're all on the same page. So as has been said, we will just briefly touch also on the upcoming plenary and maybe some of the key items in IPBES 12. So what is IPBES? Basically, IPBES is the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, established in 2012 in Panama following years of consultations between governments and stakeholders. Currently, it has 152 member states. IPBES' main mission is to strengthen the knowledge foundations for better policy through science in support of conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, sustainable development, as well as long-term human well-being. The plenary of IPBES is the highest decision-making body. At IPBES plenaries, we make a lot of effort to accommodate both stakeholders and observers who are who are members, who are states who are not yet members of IPBES mainly. The IPBES is also supported by two bodies, the Bureau, which is an administrative body, and the Multidisciplinary Expert Panel, which provides technical and scientific advice to the platform. And that is supported by a number of expert groups, and overall, the secretariat of IPBES provides support to IPBES. I think I want to touch on a couple of points around the guiding principles for IPBES. One, IPBES was founded to provide policy-relevant information, but not policy prescriptive advice. And I think this is important in the way we approach how we do our work. And secondly, IPBES must ensure the credibility, relevance, and legitimacy of its work through peer review, as well as through transparent reviews by governments and other experts. IPBES fosters collaboration with other existing initiatives among the biodiversity-related MEAs and other UN bodies, but also with networks of scientists and other knowledge holders. I think one of the areas where IPBES pioneers is this area of recognizing and respecting and incorporating indigenous and local knowledge in our work. And I think the question usually is, why is science not enough? And I think we recognize, in IPBES, through the findings of our assessments, that some of the areas that are still today, reservoirs of biodiversity are lands that are managed by indigenous and local communities. And they tap into thousands of years of knowledge of how to manage and live with nature. And I think it would be a big mistake for us not to tap into that knowledge and other diverse forms of knowledge. And it is not, it does not dilute science, but it actually strengthens our way of assessing and synthesizing all knowledge that is available to us. Just to take a quick look at our assessments, IPBES undertakes regular assessments at the request of governments, and following scoping and selection of experts who then undertake these assessments. These assessments are presented to plenaries for approval by governments, and then a lot of work afterwards to improve uptake. We have done a number of reports from reports that were published in 2016, and then the regional reports in 2018. The main, I think, report that has been, really seminal and impactful has been the IPBES Global Assessment Report, which was approved in 2019. And since then, we've published a number of reports, including last year, when we approved the report on interlinkages between biodiversity, water, food, health, and climate change, the nexus assessment, and the assessment on transformative change. These usually attract a lot of media, like publicity, and raise awareness among the general public. But I think more importantly, I think the impact that we look and we hope to achieve more is when these reports are taken up and the key findings are taken up in policy decisions. And we're pleased that the global assessment was quite instrumental in informing target setting for the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And it has informed a number of other, reports, including, for instance, the Global Risk Report, but decisions as well and commitments made by, governments in several bodies. I think what is key, though, is that this is an area that IPBES has identified, not just, with policymakers, but generally with all of the other actors that needs or requires, strengthening. And we would like to see more commitment to resource how we can actually strengthen more uptake. The work that we do usually, it takes over, a period of time, and the work that we're currently working on, or we are currently in the middle of what we call the rolling work program up to 2030. We've approved the Nexus and Transformative Change Assessment. In February, we will be approving the Business and Biodiversity Assessment, which is looking at the dependency of business on biodiversity and the impact of business on biodiversity, and looking at ways of measuring this in order to then inform actions by business, by governments, and by other actors. And we've also recently launched the second global assessment, which is a report that we hope will help governments take stock of progress with regards to the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, but also help governments to set the post-2030 Global Biodiversity Agenda. Accompanying that is the monitoring assessment, as well as the spatial planning assessments. So what is happening in Manchester in 2026, I think I said 2025 there, it's actually from 3 to 8 February 2026. We will be meeting in Manchester for the IPBES 12 plenary. And the main item on the agenda is the approval of this important report on what we call the methodological assessment of the impact and dependence of business on biodiversity and nature's contributions to people. Basically, the objective of the report is really to strengthen our knowledge base, to support efforts by business to achieve this vision of living in harmony, with nature by 2050, and to ensure that we help to develop coherent language, concepts, and methodologies for measuring the dependencies of business on biodiversity, as well as the impact of business on biodiversity. I think a lot of what we know is quite substantial in the impacts area. We know how businesses affect or impact biodiversity. But I think there's a big gap with regards to how business depends on biodiversity. And we believe that unless businesses become aware and unless policymakers become aware of how much they depend on biodiversity, they will never be able to measure clearly the risks associated with the loss of biodiversity. So understanding your dependency on biodiversity or understanding our dependence on biodiversity helps us to recognize as well that if we degrade biodiversity, if we lose biodiversity, we actually lose our ability to make, a profit. We lose our ability to basically make livelihoods associated with nature. So we will have other, areas like, looking at building and capacity strengthening knowledge foundations and supporting policy. We will also be looking at the recent review of IPBES. IPBES undertakes periodic reviews of its effectiveness. And every 5 years or so, like we look at how well are we doing, what are the areas that are weaknesses, and what can we strengthen, and plenary will consider this. And then lastly, the plenary will also consider requests for new assessments, but the MAP and the Bureau have advised plenary to basically consider inviting, MAP and Bureau to look at that between IPBES 12 and IPBES 13. So meaning, to think about what are ways to continue to strengthen uptake, but also what are ways to perhaps look at developing a program and a strategy beyond, the current work program. So that is basically what we're looking at in the next plenary. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was more than the 6 minutes, but you are our guest here in Geneva. You're the only panelist here who is not Geneva-based, so it's a pleasure to hear back from you. So now we move to the next plenary taking place the same week as your plenary. Is this farmer's first plenary of the new established panel on pollution. And I'm turning to Ms. Jacqueline Alvarez, who is the head of the Chemicals and Health branch at UNEP. Let's hear from you what we are expecting there.
Thank you, Diana. Please let me know 2 minutes before so that I don't go over. So you have been hearing a lot about the ISP CWP, but probably as our executive secretary of IPBES have said, you might not be very knowledgeable of what it is at this stage. So I will start maybe defining or telling you, sharing with you the 5 main functions of the panel. And it starts with horizon scanning, conducting assessments, providing up-to-date information, facilitating information sharing, and one that was very complicated to get through, but it's integration of capacity building into the functions and the work of the panel. So those 5 things, and if you look at cartoons and find the commonalities or the differences, resonate very well with what IPBES and IPCC already do. So those are no news to any one of you. The meeting in February will start the 1st of February with meetings of the regional groups and some briefings by the secretariat. Then from 2 to 6, we will continue with the skeleton of the house we are constructing at this moment. So what happened in Punta del Este in June is that the foundational document that describes the overall functions and roles and structure, the governance of the panel were defined. But we still have some other things that will constitute the foundation of the new panel. So what are we expecting to happen that week here in Geneva? First, we have to elect new officers because the process ended with the establishment of the panel. Now we are in a new phase that will, in a way, bring us with a new guiding group of people that will, in a way, moderate that session and thereafter until the next meeting. We will have to consider the physical location of the secretariat. So far, we have 2 proposals on the table, and the plenary will need to look at the offers. We will go into the rules of procedure, especially for the plenary of the panel. Particularly the rules of procedure, we can say we have not advanced and that we are very advanced because many of the things in the foundational document can be moved strategically and very quickly to that. Why is that important? Because we need to understand what are the rules of the game. The other part that will be for consideration is intersessional work. Is there anything that the panel could be doing between plenary 1 and plenary 2? What is that? That needs to be defined. So UNEA last week also requested the plenary 1 to look at being operational very, very quickly. That means that the role and the tasks of this first week of February is essential to start very quickly with the work program and those questions that I was talking before. The type of questions we still don't know, it will depend, but the interactions with IPBES, IPCC and others is essential because the panels can talk to each other. The MEAs can talk to the panel can talk to the MEAs, to the global framework on chemicals. Those relationships are essential and critical because we don't want overlaps, but what we really want is to co-create together. It's a collective journey, that's for sure.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. And I can add that we have a series of events that we run in preparation. So those who want to get more in depth and are not yet following that series, join us in that journey. I also wanted to add that we look very much to present in Geneva the reports that you will be agreeing on. And with that, I turn to the next brother or sister, the oldest in the fratrie, as we say in French, IPCC. So let's hear from Mr. Moxit. You are meeting in March in Thailand, Bangkok, in a UN venue. So let's hear from you what's going to happen there. And if you could stick to the time, that would be great. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear Diana. And I want to start by congratulating you for the work we are doing here in Geneva. So I think this is a sort of legacy you have it here. And also, I will start by also explain sort of how IPCC is really working. And yes, when it was established in 1988 by the World Meteorological Organization and UNEP, they are the parent organization. And then they did have as a strict mandate is to assess research, not to do research. This is very key information. And second, also, we have we are working by plenaries. We have in average 2 plenaries a year. And also we have a bureau, elected bureau. And also we have an executive committee, which is meeting each month. Now, what we'll have this, I said also that's the work, how the best interface is built is what this 10 step, which are, I call them 10 commandments. One, it demonstrates the coordination between members, scientific and scientists, and also government. From the decision for any report, we start by the first step, which is the scoping meeting. Scoping meeting is attended by experts, nominated by government, but selected by the bureau, by scientists. After this, you have this timeline. The scoping meeting is providing the outline of this report. The outline is introduction, executive summary, and also chapters. Then we need the drafting team. Who are the drafting author? They are experts, nominated by whom? By governments, selected by the bureau. So this is the interface. Then the drafting team start writing the first draft. The first draft is sent for expert review. Any expert, and I am taking the opportunity here in this room, if you are expert in any area for these outlines, you are, by self-declaration, you can be expert reviewer. That means this is how IPCC open. And then the drafting team, the authors, have the obligation to take in consideration any comment. This is how it is built. And it is the aller-retour between government and scientists till we prepare the summary for policymaker, which is sent, the draft is sent to government for review, and the drafting team is taking in consideration all these comments, and any comment is considered. Either it is included, it is works, or it is rejected. But rejected, included is also staying in our website, matter of transparency. I am calling IPCC like this house built by glass. Everybody can see what is inside. So now we are now in 7th cycle. And I think it started almost 2 years. And what I can say before attacking the coming plenary, we didn't lose one day. We didn't stop working. We heard our chair saying that we need the timeline, but apart the approval of timeline, everything is done. We have the outline of our all report. We took all meetings, all lead author meetings took place. The last one was in Paris, the first week of December, where for the first time in history, we did have 660 expert meeting in Paris. I think, but the meeting was more or less almost 700 participants. It's a big in the history lead author meeting for IPCC, which was a good demonstration of what was indicated by the chair vision about inclusivity. Believe me, I was there. I saw the room, and in terms of balances between regional, distribution, it was excellent. Distribution about gender, it was excellent. Distribution about also newcomer and all the people involved in IPCC, it was excellent. So at least we have almost 60% as newcomer and also 40 from the, the past colleague. So it was excellent. And also
you have 30 seconds to 1 minute.
I will conclude now because now, and this is to have, but IPCC has 37 years of experience. And I start by thanking you, congratulate you. Please, I am seeking your indulgence. So, but anyway, but for the moment, I think in terms of what is specific in this cycle, I want to highlight it, is the number of expert meetings we are handling. It is for the first time, the number of expert meetings are huge. Why? It is, we want exactly to reinforce the voice of science and also to increase the inclusivity and also not only this to introduce what is the best use of intelligence, artificial intelligence, and this will be through two collocated experts. Now what is coming for our plenary in March in Bangkok, it will take place in United Nations headquarters there. It will be more or less focused, it will be a sort of business as usual plenary, because we are still looking for the timeline, but we want to postpone the approval of our plan, timeline till the P65. However, as I said, we have a bureau meeting, and this bureau meeting will happen here in Geneva in the last week of February. This is the practice, and I will be honored to have Sonia as bureau member and Sebastian here. And for me, let me to demonstrate to you already the bureau meeting, because we have the presence of bureau members, around 40 people, but with the government representative. For me, bureau meetings is like a semi-plenary. And then we will take the opportunity to discuss the agenda for P64 that should take place in last week of March. And what is new for this one is exactly to look what kind of expert meeting we can have, we can discuss, we can approve in order to make the improved quality of our 7th cycle. The second thing, I think, as I said, the IPCC is old by 37 years. And I think for 5 years, after 5 years, we need to change, to revise the rules and procedure. In this bureau meeting, we will try to discuss the possibility to discuss new rules and procedure, what the kind or the one that can contribute to the improvement. Also, we will look for any possibility to include more involvement for young, scientists, like a scholarship program, also the chapter scientists, and this can be something that can be help and improve the quality of, and we will use the bureau meeting as well as the plenary in March to prepare in good way the possibility to gather all the conditions to come to the consensus to approve our timeline, not the outline, outline is approved, timeline for this cycle. So with this, I think we will conclude, and we hope that in Bangkok, it will be a good outcome. I am sorry if I took long, but I know I count on your indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Maksip, and good morning, everyone. Now that we have heard from our panelists about the journey ahead for each of the scientific panels, the next set of panelists will provide us with insights on how they engage with sciencey policy from a member state, economic, and civil society perspective. So we've heard from Ambassador Vertley earlier on the informal group of Friends of Science initiated at UNEA, and we are now joined by Sebastian Koenig, the Chief Scientist at the International Affairs Division in the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment. Sebastian, from your experience sitting at the intersection of global sciencey policy panels and domestic policy processes, where do you see the main gaps are between these two areas, and how can these upcoming milestones help close these? Sebastian, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And before turning to that question specifically, I'd like just to highlight a few things. And we have been discussing now the future milestones, but let me just draw you to the past just for a little bit and then circle back to the milestones ahead of us. So, since the mid-19th century, we have been seeing over 700 MEAs being concluded. This is an estimation, of course, and 250 of them still in force is the estimation that we have at hand. Since 1972, we have had, of course, an increase in these conventions, so it means that the global community has chosen a way of addressing specific environmental concerns multilaterally through these conventions. The Montreal Protocol, for example, is known to be very effective in reducing now 98% of ozone-depleting substances. So it's considered to be highly effective protocol, multilateral agreement, and since there has been universal ratification, there has been clear targets, and it has been also backed by science, which is very important, of course. So this path that the global community has chosen has led us, though, to a certain proliferation, fragmentation, since we have been looking at the issue more in a siloed approach. And it has been shown, of course, by observation and evidence that these single issues that we address in the conventions cannot be addressed always in a single siloed approach. We have seen this, for example, for the warming stripes that we all know, and also the biodiversity loss depicted here in the lower part of this slide. So, of course, they are intertwined, so it needs to have some kind of an approach that addresses that element. And the way we kind of approach the question of this proliferation and this siloed approach is that there are multiple ways of going about it. One is to, for example, promote synergies among the MEAs. One example is the Bonn process that looks at the biodiversity-related conventions and uses IPBES as indicators and monitoring elements to foster coherence among the MEAs. Another approach is to look at the governance itself and the way science and policy interact. I'll give you an example that stems from the IPCC and the UNFCCC, which means that we have seen that the IPCC has worked on the 1.5 degree target and goal, which has been taken up basically by the UNFCCC, which has then again circled back to the IPCC when they produced in AR6, they produced the 1.5 special report. So there's been a clear interaction of policy relevance, interaction among the science and the policy making basically in that example, which is crucial. So it's about timeliness, it's about making sure the processes are aligned. Colleague Abdallah mentioned that the timeline needs to be approved in the IPCC when the reports will be coming out. I think this is crucial because it exactly plays into this question of policy alignment and making sure that the products coming out of these science policy interfaces are relevant at the end of the day. So this is also important. And then the third point I just want to highlight is the coherence among the SPIs. And the event today is basically one attempt just to making sure that we are talking to each other, we're making sure that we are coherent and in our messaging, and also we bring together the communities, be it the scientific communities, but also the policy communities, which are most often, as we saw at the beginning of my intervention, they are most siloed to some extent. So we want to make sure that we have a coherence among them. And then as a last slide, let me just dive into the last point, which brings me back to the outlook and the future and the milestones ahead. There are so many ways of really increasing coherence among SPIs, and we are, there could be scientific elements to it, there could be policy elements to it. For example, the authors that have been mentioned, the experts, it's critical that they're interacting with each other, they're critical that they are signing up for, let's say, the other side. So if you're a biodiversity expert, let's have you signed up for being an expert for a review in the IPCC and vice versa. So there are many ways of increasing the interaction at the scientific level, but there's also, and I think this is an obligation as we see it at the policy level, for us as well at the national level, in the ministries, we're often also kind of separated from topically or thematically. So working in the environment ministry versus in the energy ministry, etc. So we don't have that. We also want to make sure that we have that interaction at the national level between the policy levels, and that's critical. And that's independent basically on the timing. So that has to be continuous in our attempt. But looking at the IPCC and IPBES.
Tic-tac.
Thank you. More specifically, it's very interesting because just highlighting a few things coming up, that in 2028, by the way, IPCC is turning 40 in that year. So it would be wonderful if we had all of the AR7 working group reports by 2028 to celebrate that anniversary. So we have that basically lined up in a sense also with the IPBES delivery on the second global assessment, which is also timed around the same time. So we need to live that connection, and that's why I highlighted here as a placeholder the workshop from the past between IPBES and IPCC that has happened in 2018, I think. So the idea is to hold also a workshop between the experts of both communities in 2026. It will be hosted here in Switzerland. We will be inviting for that. And it's an attempt to really bringing those communities together and to be coherent between the SPIs. So this is certainly a highlight that leads up to the delivery of the reports in 2028 at both sides. And then, of course, I want to highlight the new kid on the block as well. So we're going to have certain decisions that are going to be made also that will be impacting. And I want to make sure that ISP, CWP is also, in terms of timing, aligned with the other two, just to make sure that we stay coherent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. We will now move to Andreas Obrecht, who is the policy lead for Nature Action Agenda at the World Economic Forum. Andreas, given that you're working closely with different stakeholders, from business leaders to policymakers, we would like to hear from you, from your perspective, what are the opportunities and challenges for private sector engagement with the upcoming policy panels, and how is the World Economic Forum engaging with them? Andreas, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, we are an international organization that convenes leaders from all walks of life to tackle or to discuss and work on issues that are of global relevance, to the different stakeholders. And of course, climate and nature is one of our core issues that we are discussing. We are applying a multi-stakeholder approach. I think we do actual mainstreaming almost every day. We are a neutral convener. What we do is we convene across the year. We convene communities, initiatives. We have our events, some flagship events, and we have knowledge products that we develop in very close cooperation with our business partners and our other stakeholder partners. So one encouraging just fact that I can share with you that just came out this month is that green economy is growing fast. It is the second most fast growing sector next or after the tech sector. So we have a momentum that we can leverage, we can build on, despite the challenges that we also face, the geopolitical challenges, the challenges that we face here in Geneva in multilateral system. I think we have also many opportunities, significant opportunities here. So what we do, for example, at the forum is we work with our business partners and other stakeholders on the sector transitions to nature positives. So we are using scientific information, of course, that includes the one that from IPCC and IPBES to develop these knowledge products. I think it is really, really critical. I think it's incredibly helpful what has been produced by IPBES and IPCC. Of course, it takes time for this scientific information, for the assessment results to trickle down to action, I would say. I think it is normal. So we have to look at the work of IPCC and IPBES and then, of course, the new panel as a continuum that we engage with, and also the results. It is not just once they are released, we can work with them, but it takes sometimes a long time, or it is helpful over a long time period, I would say. In the case of IPBES, of course, we have the policy support function that I think is an extremely helpful function. I checked a bit in our reports what kind of sources we used, and some of them were actually from the IPBES policy support function. That also brings me to the opportunity to raise an idea also maybe here, is that the policy support function could come into play before the commissioning of an assessment or of different assessments, and to help, I think Jacqueline Alvarez mentioned it, to also engage stakeholders in the formulation of the questions that are going to be addressed. I think there we have an opportunity to have a maybe more direct engagement, not only of businesses, but also of other stakeholders. We had, for example, Sam here talking on the behalf of youth. So I think maybe also a bit more granularity in this engagement could be helpful. Of course, the sector that the business sector, of course, is very, very diverse. Also, we have from small businesses to large multinational corporations. There is a big spectrum. So I think there is a potential to work on. I also just want to mention that, of course, we very welcome the third panel, the completing, or not maybe for the time being, the science policy interfaces. So we are, of course, very interested in following that. Yes, just to conclude that we are, of course, following very closely what is happening at the different events that are coming up, and we are looking forward to continue our engagement. We appreciate the strong leadership also by the leadership of the different science policy interfaces that play a critical role, and also in mobilizing attention and awareness. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Andreas. And finally, we are going to hear from David Azoulay, the Managing Attorney at the Geneva office and the Director of Environmental Health Program at the Center for International Environmental Law, CIEL. So David, given all these reflections on strengthening science policy interfaces, could you provide us now with a civil society perspective? David, you have the floor.
Sure, and thank you very much. And it's always a privilege and a challenge to speak at the end of it, because so much has been said already, but it also gives me a chance to try to wrap up and provide some perspective around all this. I will focus a lot of my remarks on the upcoming ISP CWP plenary, both because this is one that I've been most involved in, and also it's the new one. It's the one we're building, and so we have the most chances. I think the other institutions that we've heard before are already well functioning, they're well established. The new kid on the block, as Sebastian was saying, is the one we're building and preparing now, so I think it's useful to look at this in particular. Summarizing a lot of what's been already said this morning, we're witnessing two worrying trends in the science policy interface. One is the opening, questioning, and undermining of science. that is mirrored with new ways of engagement by academics and scientists. Scientists are now engaging and actively engaging in policy settings in ways that were quite unheard of before, and I think this is quite interesting. The other worrying trend that we're seeing is the undermining of global multilateral decision making and trying to restrict both the space that is given to multilateral spaces and the scope of what those decisions can be. And one unfortunate example in the context of the ISP CWP, I'm still practicing saying the word, it's still new, is the compromise that was made in Montevideo to establish, I think it was a great success to establish the panel, but it was done at some price. And part of this price was to bracket even the mention of the protection of health and the environment in the objective of the panel. And sure, we can all agree that this is what we want the panel to do. But the reality of the dynamics that we saw are very worrying, and that's a problematic trend. And I think this is not totally unrelated to the one major elephant in the room that I haven't heard mentioned at all today, is the question of conflict of interest. Over the past 40 or 50 years, we're dealing with major challenges for every aspect of health and the environment that truly threaten the survivability of the human civilization on our planet. And we're dealing with actors who are causing some of those impacts. Those impacts, they don't appear out of nowhere. There are some active actors that are contributing or causing these impacts. Today, there are those same actors who continue to benefit for the continuation of the status quo and whose survival, power, influence continue to rest on the continuation and of the status quo and on those impacts. And the same actors who have lied and who continue to lie about what those impacts are and what they have known and continue to know about these impacts. And so for us as a global community, to continue to treat these actors as trustworthy partners in designing and implementing the solution is nonsense. I'm sorry to say, but it is nonsense. And unless we address and change this particular aspect, we're going to continue to fail, and we're going to continue to see the impacts on climate, on biodiversity, on health, on environment to worsen. And sure, we're going to be able to address and manage this in the margin, but this is going to continue to worsen, and we're going to continue to fail. And so I really wanted to mention this as a key aspect that is relevant for all science policy interface, but particularly relevant for the ISP CWP that we're setting up. And in fact, the question of conflict of interest policy is on the agenda of our next meeting of the next plenary. And again, I think among all the other things that need to be done, this is something that is going to be extremely important and send the signal about whether we can expect this, this particular panel to effectively change what is happening and effectively change the situation on the ground. So for this upcoming plenary, we have two very strong reality or imperative, I would say. First, we have to face the reality that we have to stop considering these actors as trustworthy, and we have and that should be reflected in the conflict of interest policy that we should be put in place. And our other imperative that goes beyond that particular plenary is that we have to start acting. We cannot wait. We cannot think that we have to wait for the outcome of those specific panels to start acting. There is a lot of science already available, whether it's in the area of climate, in the area of biodiversity, in the area of pollution. A lot of the science and the necessary knowledge to act is already here. And I think it is very important that we continue to develop this knowledge and develop this, and I'm wrapping up now, but also not think of these as of these panels as the one that will provide the solution and the necessary incentive. As was mentioned a number of times, there will be policy informative but not policy prescriptive, but policy has to act, and we need actual policy, and we cannot wait for that. On our end, from civil society, we will continue to contribute through expertise, argue for transparency, because transparency is demonstrated to lead to better decision-making and better policy. We'll continue to create space for the voices of vulnerable communities and impacted population, not only to be heard, but to be taken into account and to serve as the ground for future policy decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, and to all our panelists for sharing your perspectives and for your insightful contributions. I will now pass back to Diana.
And I pass it back to Jane because we are really, we are 11 minutes late, so I apologize for that. Thank you all for these insights. We are sorry that we cannot give the floor to the room, but there will be a reception after the closing we have this panel, then we have a closing, then there is going to be some drinks and opportunities to exchange with people. So with that, Jen, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Diana. And I take this opportunity to ask for a huge round of applause for the Gen team for putting on this fabulous event. Great. Okay, we are at our third panel for the day, which is called a fireside chat. I was hoping there would be actually a fireside here, but we have to imagine the crackling. We'll keep it a bit cozy. And our task is to speak about how governments and stakeholders engage in the SPIs moving forward. And without further ado, I would like to welcome all the panelists here. As you can see, it's an all-women power panel, which is great. And we have another woman joining us online. Welcome, Lindsay. I will introduce you in a moment, but we'll start with Sonia here. Sonia Seneviratne is a professor at ETH Zurich, my home university as well. And of course, she's the vice chair of the working group 1 of the IPCC. Sonia, we just heard David's very clear and I think very important calling out of conflicts of interest. Can you share with us, please, how you at IPCC deal with conflicts of interest and why is it important?
Yeah, thank you first for the introduction, the invitation. It's a very stimulating event. So I would say in terms of conflict of interest, certainly in my opinion, that's something where we could also improve. And on the side of IPCC, I mean, we do have basically, for instance, the bureau members, we do submit conflict of interest form, and these are reviewed by a conflict of interest committee. But lately, we just had some discussions, for instance, also within the bureau about this, because regarding the nomination of the experts, so the authors contributing to the report, what happens is they are first nominated by their countries or by scientific societies, then they are selected, and the conflict of interest forms are submitted after that. And we think it's not optimal because, of course, once we have selected the authors, if there were a problem, it's difficult to find another person who has exactly the same expertise. So we have had, and this is just an informal discussion so far, but I think it could be a discussion we might have in the bureau in upcoming meetings, to which extent it would make sense that when experts apply to be authors, that they also submit their conflict of interest form at the same time, so that this can be part of the review process. I just want to mention, and I basically commented on this explicitly, I asked for my name to be mentioned in the last bureau meeting about this, that, for instance, there were concerns because there are some authors who have been selected who are actually employed by fossil fuel companies. And I would say it's probably an issue and some type of conflict of interest, because we know 90% of the emissions of CO2, which is leading to climate change, basically due to fossil fuel burning. And I do wonder when you have an employee, even though maybe the person is perfect, but the optics is not very good towards the outside world. And of course, there is a question of loyalty towards your employer versus IPCC.
Thanks, Sonia. I think this is very important to highlight this, and hopefully that can also be inspiration for the other panels. We heard how important the rules of procedure are repeatedly today, so I hope that will be addressed in the ISPCWP. Good. Next, I would like to welcome Lindsay Fielder-Cook, who is the Interim Deputy Director and Representative for the Human Impacts of Climate Change at CUNO. And Lindsay, you're a stakeholder in this process. And I can relate to that role because I have the same role for the Plastics Treaty right now as an observer. And we often have, as bystanders, not directly involved in the process, we often have clear ideas how things should be done differently. So my question to you, Lindsay, if you could change something, what would you change about how IPCC works and why?
So I want to start just briefly by some background because we've been an observer for 9 years. So we have seen shifts both in what's happening at the IPCC in terms of political pressures as well as science communication, but also in terms of our role as an observer. So initially there to support and encourage and communicate. The IPCC has, I think, quite a remarkable way of engaging observers to speak and contribute after states have had a chance in approval sessions directly after working on a sentence or paragraph. It is something that I would love to see in other processes. But what we are seeing, and to answer your question on what we would change, I would hope that the IPCC would use its red line more. And its red line is to say, to push back on inappropriate political influence in the plenary that would be attempting to weaken the scientific findings. The IPCC has a red line to say, we can't change that language because it would challenge the integrity of the science. And that for me is one of the reasons I love working in the IPCC, in addition to my work at other multilateral processes, Human Rights Council and the climate change negotiations. The other things, to answer your question on what would I change, I would change the confidence. I would increase the confidence in the IPCC plenaries and chairs to limit states to speaking to the 3 minutes, regardless of how powerful they are. I would encourage that red line. I would encourage supporting scientists in their findings so that what I would call inappropriate political efforts to weaken the science can be pushed back by the very scientists themselves. What we're seeing now in those last 9 years is a pushback time. We are in a denial time, and we are in a military spending time, and we are in a real fear time, and we're not seeing the transitions we need, and we're not seeing the real focus on root causes. And human beings are not good at stopping themselves. So encouraging the IPCC to focus on the root causes, to not be afraid to call out on root causes what is real transformation in actions and what would be false solutions. For example, we need the IPCC to be very clear on risks of options that are high risk, that options like reliance on carbon capture storage when it is beyond what is physically possible, what is effective, to be very clear about limits to carbon dioxide removal rather than allowing options in there that are not only unsustainable but are dangerous, and to also highlight risks of solar radiation modification, which is not even at a scale of looking but has new novel risks. We need those risks to be in there, and as observers, we are the ones often fighting to continue to keep that risk language in because some states would like to push it out.
Thank you, Lindsay, for those very clear words. And I wish I could ask a little bit more about the red lines, but yeah, my red line is the time. Diana's looking at me. Sonia, one quick comment on the red lines.
No, I think I do support a lot of what was just said. I think from Lindsay that these are excellent points about red lines. I was there at one approval session of a report where a red line was applied. It was for the 1.5 degree report, and there were a lot of efforts to accommodate some comments, but clearly some comments were politically motivated because it was a statement that was scientifically solid, and the scientists said there is no way we can change this. It's scientifically correct. And at the last day, and I must say it was our present chair, Jim Ski, actually, who was chairing that meeting at that moment. He said, okay, we did a lot of effort, so we can, there is this option, as this was mentioned also by Felix Wertley. I mean, it's possible for some representative of some country to disassociate. So yes, basically this was offered to say this, basically this country can say that they don't agree with this text, but in the end the text was approved. And I do feel IPCC maybe can basically enforce this more often, because in the end it's about the science cannot be influenced by policies.
Thanks, Sonia. I think it's a really good example, and it sort of also highlights what our value can also be in this process. As scientists, of course, we are not supposed to be policy prescriptive. We don't want to, but we can certainly say, if you take this decision, then the consequences will be this and that based on our scientific understanding, right? So I think that is maybe an important role for scientists also to take to help policymakers understand the consequences of actions. Okay, we are moving on to IPBES, and we have with us here Whitney Fleming from the ONET member organization, which is the open-ended network of IPBES stakeholders. And Whitney, you have prepared some thoughts you would like to share. So over to you, please.
Thank you. I'd like to just start with a brief story that some of you may be familiar with. In 1915, Sir Ernest Shackleton led an expedition to the Antarctic that went badly wrong. They just rediscovered his boat in 2022. But in order to escape a terrible situation, he and some of his men embarked on a 1,300-kilometer journey across open ocean to save their crew. And what I think that story illustrates is critical optimism. Not a naive belief that things will get better, but a deep hope and understanding that if we want things to change, we must act, and we have to. And I think that's something that unites ONET members. ONET, as the open-ended network of IPBES stakeholders, is a collective of individuals around the world who want to contribute in a positive way to our understandings of what is happening to global biodiversity. The network is also a big contributor to what precedes the IPBES plenary, which is this year on February 2nd. So right before, which is Stakeholder Day. Stakeholder Day is open to anyone who wants to participate. And at this day, the stakeholders collectively come up with points that they would like IPBES to consider and address in their plenary. IPBES, the stakeholder group itself, is made up of two types of stakeholders: contributors and end users. So contributors could be people like knowledge holders or scientists like myself. I personally study human health and well-being as it relates to biodiversity, but it could also be people who are end users like policymakers and businesses. And the ONET has a few main objectives, which includes two-way communication between its members and IPBES, as well as disseminating IPBES's products. We currently work under an initiative process where any member can bring forth an initiative to promote ideas, and one of such is a teaching initiative for this exact objective. Also to reach out to the diversity of potential users, as well as to strengthen the platform's deliverables, and finally to mobilize resources for capacity building. Our approach is that we are self-organized. This will be ONET's 10th year at this specific plenary. We are run by stakeholders, a facilitation team, who, as you mentioned, this is a panel of all women, and I think the labor of that engagement often falls on women, as is shown by our facilitation team and the people creating Stakeholder Day. We also hope to be inclusive, engaging policymakers and anyone around the world who would like to contribute, and open-ended, hopefully a permanent and ongoing initiative. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Whitney. Yeah, feel free to clap. Absolutely. Good. And next to Whitney, we have Dorothea Hoog-Peter, who is a scientific officer at the Swiss Biodiversity Forum. Dorothea, I understand you also have prepared some comments. Do you also have slides?
I don't have slides.
Okay, good. Please share with us how you engage with IPBES and your recommendations for how to improve that.
Yeah, so I engage in this science policy interface at the national and at the international level. So the Swiss Biodiversity Forum is part of the Swiss Academy of Science and specifically of the Science and Policy Platform. So our role is really to work on the science policy interface at the national level. We work very closely with the Federal Office for the Environment, and we prepare reports, we prepare fact sheets, but we also give direct feedback, for example, on the recent update of the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan that was prepared after the adoption of the new biodiversity framework. So we have a group of experts that are members, and then we have this bureau where we support the work. And I think one of the important parts of these interactions is this trust. So and the close collaborations. So we have very short ways, as we say in Switzerland, where we can directly call some members of the Federal Office of the Environment to exchange on issues, but where also they can call us and where we can really have this very direct input. At the same time, I think one of the challenges that we have already heard before today is the interdisciplinarity of all these environmental crises. So biodiversity, I think, is impacted by most of the decisions that our government takes. And I think that we try to be interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary in the experts that we have. So for example, we have in the committee, we have a linguist who talks about, who works on narratives around biodiversity. And I think her input is really, really valuable on the work that we do. And at the same time, we meet this still often siloed government organization where there is effort to bring together. But I think that this could be really strengthened a lot, that government entities that are, in their view, very far from biodiversity also consider the impact of their decisions on biodiversity. And so I think that in general, what I can say is that this national interface between science and policy plays a huge role. I think IPBES is really doing great work, and I'm also participating there. So we are giving scientific advice during plenaries, and we are also running the national IPBES platform. I think it's great, and I also think it gains a lot of value when it's taken to the national level, where because that's where a lot of policy decisions happen. And there is policy means, there is specificities, there is local knowledge, etc. And taking this to the national level is very important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dorothea. Yes. Whitney, Dorothea, I assume you both will also still be around afterwards. If countries have questions, maybe also how to strengthen their own national biodiversity work, I assume they can reach out to you guys. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We don't have time on our side, so I'm going to plow on. Finally, coming to our lovely speakers over here that will help us understand the chemical space. And first, I would like to invite Abiola Olanipekum to share some thoughts with us. Abiola is the chief of
the Science and Technical Assistance Branch of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, lovingly called BRS. Okay. So, Abiola, please, I invite you to share your thoughts with us, please.
Thank you very much, Jane, and it's a great pleasure to be part of this conversation to share the BRS experience. And looking at the BRS experience for more than 2 decades, it's a testament indeed that the science policy action really works. That this is very, very important for scientists to be able to be embedded in the process for policy making when it comes to sound management of chemicals and waste. And looking at the 3 conventions, Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm, what we have is we have engagement of experts and scientists through supporting policy design and not just assessment. And the industry engages through sharing of data and driving safer chemical innovation. While the civil society and communities, what they do within the BRS conventions is to engage by providing early warning and local evidence. But one critical part of what we do as BRS is when we had the adoption of the From Science to Action Initiative 2015. So parties decided that it was very important to ensure that scientific knowledge and policy action are linked, and it was time to bridge that gap in ensuring that policymakers, they are able to provide informed decisions using the latest scientific information. What I'd like to do is to quickly highlight the 4 major parts or elements of this science to action. Number 1 is the strengthening of the science policy interface by ensuring that the best available scientific knowledge is accessible, is understandable, and relevant for decision makers. Translating science into action, this is done through practical tools, guidance, policy relevant outputs, and also risk management and regulatory measures. Number 3 is enhancing stakeholder engagement by promoting collaboration among governments, scientists, industry, civil society, and international organizations to support informed and coordinated action. Because this is very important, the informed and the coordinated actions among key stakeholders. And finally, building national capacities. And this is what the secretariat do. We go out to train on technical assistance, on how to use knowledge that is available at the national level to implement the BRS conventions. And quickly, in rounding up, 4 takeaway points I would like to, because I know we don't have time, 4 takeaway points looking at the BRS experience. Number 1 is that the BRS conventions show that science can drive action when it is trusted, when it is embedded in the process, when it is inclusive and linked to decisions. So scientists are not just on the sidelines. They're not just providing advice at the last minute, but science is right from the beginning embedded in the process for policy making and for informed decision making by government. Number 2, strengthening the science policy interface is a governance choice that has to be made and followed up with very strong stakeholder collaboration. Number 3, getting it right for chemicals and pollution strengthens our response to the entire triple planetary crisis, while we reshape how science best serves not just the society, but the future generation. And finally, the BRS engagements are platforms for governments and stakeholders. These platforms already exist. And what we want is that this platform should be continually and fully utilized. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Very, very clear and very helpful. And, you know, if we think of IPCC and IPBES as the older sisters of ISPCWP, then the MEAs are maybe the cousins. And the older cousins can also give some advice. So I invite now Brenda Kukuk, who
is the Senior Coordination Officer at the Minamata Convention, to share some practical lessons learned from Minamata, other MEAs that may help ISP CWP to get started.
Great, thanks, Jane, and thank you for inviting us today. I'm happy to sit here beside my sister convention and provide some advice to our cousins in the science policy universe. So, a series of global mercury assessments in UNEP over the last 25 years have been really instrumental in sort of the evolution and development of the convention. And our convention entered into force in 2017 and is really mobilizing change. But as we move forward, we're seeing that we will need to increasingly move towards interconnected thinking to address many of the remaining challenges, as no single process or meeting or report can address everything. So as an example, we have the issue of artisanal and small-scale gold mining, which remains the most challenging and complex issue. It remains the largest user of mercury as well globally. So ASGM impacts on people and biodiversity are most severe, and unfortunately, the issue is still not decreasing. So we're seeing gold prices soar in today's economy, and it's a big issue. So ultimately, broadening the perspective can mobilize greater attention and resources to identify and implement effective measures to reduce and eliminate the use of mercury globally in over 80 countries. So it's a significant development issue. Our parties are engaged at our COP6 recently from the 3rd to 7th of November here in Geneva. Collaboration with both the new panel, the ISP-CWP, and IPBES were both recognized. So we need to move forward in that area. And so we can't wait to for the ISP-CWP to begin its work. Mercury pollution is linked to the energy transition. It's mining, biodiversity loss, deforestation, human health, food contamination, and global trade, and so on. So no global assessment has actually been able to focus specifically enough yet on mercury at any point in the life cycle to make it directly applicable to our convention. So we look forward to trying to make this connection more substantive so that it can help support our parties in the decision-making process. We see that possibly there could be spin-off assessments from existing assessments that already are there to maybe zoom in on mercury or chemicals as a specific issue. And we could also use support in looking, for example, at ASGM from a wider lens. My final point is just simply that priority must also be given to incorporating science from the global south. Mercury behaves differently in different environments. Most mercury problems are currently occurring in the global south, and there are major scientific gaps to fill in. So it's equally important to incorporate traditional and indigenous knowledge. And we have a long-standing collaboration on mercury with the global scientific community focusing on this. This is called the ICGMP, the International Conference on Mercury as a Global Pollutant. It gathers every 2 years. The next meeting is in October 2026 in India. And engaging with this type of committed, engaged individuals will probably help to mobilize action in existing science policy interfaces very soon. So we hope that we can elevate the chemicals, waste, and pollution agenda globally through this increased collaboration. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Brenda. So I want to particularly thank you for bringing up the indigenous knowledge and science here again. I think we all agree that this is a really, really important seat at the table that should be filled, as well as other seats that we heard about throughout the course of the day, the youth, and so on. And because our time is up now, and I see Diana saying we should wrap it up, I wish I could talk longer with you, wonderful panelists, also with you, Lindsay, online, but we will have to call it a day. So thank you so much, Lindsay. Maybe we can get a round of applause for you also. And I would like to thank all of you. I hope you can stick around after we finish here. There will be lunch outside and the stands. I encourage you to have a look at all the stands. Diana?
Indeed, but before that, there is a formal closing with Ambassador Bertley, but also Miss Higuero. I don't know if she's back Yes, there she is.
Yvonne,
So
come and
this
join
is
us
really
here,
the last part. So Miss Higuero will now guide you through the closing of the event, and so we need to move back there, and then we can eat and discuss all together. Thank you.
No, Yvonne, here, you can join us here, please. Oh, we go over there? Okay, so let's turn the chairs around.
Thank you, Lindsay. You are free to join us as well.
Welcome back to this side of the room. It's been a very active keeping us out of our chairs constantly, especially for those of us who have been involved in many meetings in the past week. It's always good to be able to move around and keep ourselves awake and energetic. So just a few words at the closing, and we're going to have some refreshments. I don't want to keep you between our talking and your refreshments, but I really wanted to thank all participants, speakers, and panelists for your very active engagement during these hours. I have to say that I'm very much in awe of Diana and her excellent Geneva Environment Network team for putting this. It's been such a special event. I think we have all learned a lot from also experience from other sectors that we don't usually work in. So it's very important to have these types of interactions because I think we can learn from each other and hear about best practices and there's a lot of similarities as well. So it's been a really good experience, and having so many impressive speakers and panelists, really, I'm very much grateful and in awe that were able to pull this together. I hope you enjoyed very much these past hours with the lightning talks. We talked about speed dating. I'm not sure if I should say that, but okay, it's like speed dating, but it's definitely lightning talks and presentations, even if they were very quick, to have that opportunity to learn about the science policy and how the science policy is related to finding ways to address the concerns that we have about the triple planetary crisis. And I think we have been able during these discussions to reaffirm amongst all of us and seeing outside how the meetings have been going and looking towards the future, that we are committed to three things. One is to strengthen the science policy interface. The second is to foster interdisciplinary and inclusive approaches. And we heard a lot about that, this need for interdisciplinary approaches and inclusivity of all stakeholders, and advance solutions that are as substantial as the crisis that we are confronting. And as we conclude, as I mentioned before, I wanted to carry forward the spirit of Geneva of cooperation, dialogue, and shared responsibility. So now we look forward to building even more bridges so that between science and policy throughout these last years, we continue building those bridges and guide us towards those solutions that can transform knowledge into action, action into hope. And I think we have to say for people, because I heard that so much, that people have to be very much at the center of what we're doing. For CITES, many of the species that we apply to conserve, they're living side by side with communities who need to be on board and to be able to be consulted, to be able to be part of the process to ensure that those habitats are maintained and see the same type of feeling in the room about indigenous knowledge and local communities. And we want to make sure that they are both planet and people at the center of everything we do, so we can have a much more healthier and sustainable future for this generation, but also for the generations to come. So really, many, many thanks for all your dedication and commitment. Now, I would like to invite both Ms. Munke and His Excellency Ambassador Wörtli to share their reflections and perspectives on how we can carry forward to today's discussion as we prepare for those important milestones that are coming next year. Could I invite Jane first, and then we can hand over to Ambassador Wörtli afterwards so he can close the event with his reflections. Jane?
Right. Right in front of you. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. So I also enjoyed this. I'm getting labeled. I also enjoyed the segment today when Diana reached out to me without really thinking about it. I said, yes, of course, because I love Jen, we love what UNEP does, so I wanted to support here. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, so I can certainly say that you have challenged me. So I hope that everyone walks away here today with having learned something. That's always my goal when I go to any event. I want to leave with having learned something. And I have learned a couple of things. One, that it's not only the weather that connects us, but it's also toxicity that connects us. And of course, it's our shared experience of being humans. We have one planet. We are collectively together in charge of ensuring that we do justice to our stewardship to this planet, to pass it on to future generations. And I think that there's a lot of knowledge, as was shared by Tobias Bosch, professor of psychology. Now we have to understand how we can put that knowledge into action. Of course, there are data gaps. Yes, we need to continue working on closing those data gaps, and we scientists will do that because curiosity always gets the better of us. But how do we put that knowledge into action? And really at the core of that, I think, are two things that I want to highlight. The first is, as Stephen mentioned, the rules of procedure are really, really, really important. And I want to quote him because I thought it was so well stated. Rules and procedures need to be right, because if not, you will get controversy and not science. And in this context, rules of procedure, we briefly touched upon the super important aspect of conflict of interest. It was interesting to hear how IPCC does it and that there is room for improvement. And so I encourage the ISP-CWP, as it establishes its rules of procedure, to take note of what works really well in the UN world. For example, at IARC, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, they have very good rules of procedure, how to engage with experts. Also the Tobacco Framework Convention, also WHO. So there is some really good precedent within the UN system for that. Of course, inclusivity is key. We want indigenous knowledge, we want global diversity, we want age and gender diversity, we need disciplinary diversity. I think that is very clear now to everyone that we're facing this huge interconnected triple planetary crisis. We cannot fix this with just one, specific expertise. We really have to focus on how we do this in an interdisciplinary way. And that is my second point, which I cannot stress enough here. That is communication. How do we encounter each other? How do we listen to each other? How do we speak with each other? And as a scientist who has a background in science, but also in science communication and also in comedy, maybe that came out a little bit too strong today, but I have done that also. I can tell you that speaking from the heart is really important. And Ko said that so beautifully. We also have to be allowed to be a little bit emotional. Even as scientists, we don't always just talk about facts. Of course, we do that when we have our hat on as scientists. But when we come here together, we also have to be human beings. And we speak to each other as human beings. And I think that would be my wish to science educators, universities, governments that support science education. Please prioritize science communication in the curricula of scientists. Scientists that are trained to become scientists that will solve the problems our world is facing need to have the skills that are necessary for science communication. And I don't mean that they have to do TED Talks and things like that, but just a basic understanding. When you speak, you think about your audience. Who are you speaking to? It's basic empathy. It's these things. Also, it matters who is speaking. That's the issue of agendas. revealing hidden agenda. We hear a lot about negotiations in good faith. We have to understand who is sending a message, conflict of interest. And these basic issues need to be taught at universities. And now I see Diana's telling me to wrap up, so I will do that. Don't overstay your welcome. Last word, hope is stronger than fear. I love that quote. So let's move forward, being carried by that. Critical, optimism, hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Amy. Yes, you have to have a self-timer from time to time. Now to you.
Thank you much. I was a very rich morning. I learned a lot to take a lot of things away. First about communication. I think we can find better names for our science policy panels. No? We have, even that we have already progress how to pronounce them, that will be the first part, because it's true we have to communicate about what they're doing, but it seems that we're still struggling with those abbreviations that we're giving ourselves. There we can do better. I take a lot of pictures also with me from today. One of them is the missing chair. I think it was a great example of communication when the people presented here their short interventions and such a picture of the missing chair. How can we bring people to the table that we're doing the work also for those that are the most, how we can do this? That's something I will take with me as one of the reminders from today. I'll say with me that a lot is done. We do a lot of similar things, but not the same. So different rules of procedure, different methodologies. I think we have and can learn much more from each other to do also better and also better connect our work. Also very much impressed those science policy panels that we have. If we look at the budgets, they're rather small. If we look at the impact what they're achieving, so much bigger. And part of the resource story is it is also done because universities and networks are contributing very much to the work. I think as we have also to remind ourselves, it's really one of those examples where we as governments invest quite significant but rather small contribution, and we have huge outcome and impact by that. And we also key importance now to coming years. We know that resources are scarce, and we have to do more. We have to be able to achieve a broad donor basis, but also to do more in the synergies part, because we know that we don't have enough resources at a global and national level, so we can better connect the science policy panels. We can also benefit much more on all the levels. One point also, someone has touched about the National Resource Panel, IRP, in stone. That's also next time we have to integrate more. Now we have the three panels we have discussed a lot today, but underlying we have also economic factors, resources are very key there than before. Also once more to see such a great marketplace outside, there's so many different associations, organizations there, we can see how important ecosystems are. It's only in silos, we have to connect with each other. And also that's why we are very pleased in Switzerland. We are offering to host ISPs WP that we decided in February in Geneva. Very much that we know that those panels are not easy to establish. From the ISPs in WP, we have done the first step. We have laid out the foundations. Now we have to make the case and show the policy work. And for that, we need the best environment, and we believe that in Geneva we can offer a lot. We have here the Malta, the Basel Stockholm Conventions. We have the Global Climates Framework, we have IPCC, we have WHO, we have this network. And last but not least, you have heard we have founded this group of friends for the science. Very much encourage all people from the governments to join this alliance, this network of friends for science and defend the science, to make best use of science. So I engage you very much to invite you to support this work. With that, I close the meeting, or is that right? Good. So it's my last official meeting this year. So it's a big pleasure to say thank you very much for all of your contributions. Thank you for the chair for hosting us. Thank you for all the experts, for the panelists, for the contributions, for the discussions. Thank you very much for that. And I wish you all a beautiful day, a good end of the year, and all the best for 2020.
No, I'm staying here actually. What are you up to?
No, I'm also with trouble in January.
Okay. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I was hoping we would have had